Hello, you darling people. Welcome to Wake Up on a Bank Holiday. Good morning, beautiful people. We are live.
The sun is rising, the sky is blue. Good morning, grand risings. Let's see what's new. It's the time of day for Sonia and crew. Good morning, grand risings. It's time to wake up with Sonia Poulton. Sonia Poulton.
Good morning to you all. How are you on this Bank Holiday Monday in the UK? It's Monday, the 4th of May. It is exactly 9 a.m. British summertime. And I am your host. Let's go. DJ Markson says, let's go, everybody. Hello, Kath and Drew. It's bank holiday today. Yes, absolutely. And hello, Karen and Christine and Stollyfires. And Drew says, I am a Zionist. Hope I am welcome. Drew, everybody is welcome around here, as long as you understand that I can be critical of a million things. But here's the thing, is that I will embrace anybody who is here for the good. I don't agree with Zionism, but you are welcome. Absolutely, you are welcome. Good morning, Jacqueline. Good morning, Bethany. And good morning, Magic Mac. Good morning, Jan. Good morning, Soho B and Jen. And Daniel and Maria. And you name it. Good evening, everybody from Australia, says Maria. And the Shaz is here as well. How are you all? I hope you are beautifully well. Hello, Ross. Thank you for joining us. It's a grey day here today. How's the weather where you are? Brits are absolutely obsessed with weather, children. We are obsessed with weather. Welcome to the show that terrifies those who rely on ignorance for power. Yes, sir and ma'am. If there's an elephant in the room, I'm calling it out, and you wouldn't expect anything different from me. Ignorance is not bliss around here. So what is going on today? We will be joined by journalist JODY McIntyre, who has been digging deep on Sir Keir Starmer and has plenty to share with us all about how compromised our Prime Minister is, if you didn't already know it, kids. We'll also be joined by Lance Shuttler, who will be joining us from the US, where he's been part of the big Pharma resistance for at least the last 6 years. And his work focuses largely on the impact of nutrition on our cognitive function. It should be very interesting. Plus, we'll be talking about Golders Green, a cult busted, rape gang fallout, and people, Candace Owens, Graham Linehan, Erika, Kirk. And I will also be doing rather a lengthy overview of the last 19 years since the disappearance of Madeleine McCann was first reported. And we will end the show with a comment about dumbing down and why it's just not for me. No, indeed. That's our show. How are you today? I hope you are well. Sollyfile says, not so bright, but every day can be good. It can. Good morning, Sean. Tanya says, give us a shout out. There you go, sweetheart. You've got one. And Mel said there's an abundance of bloody big jumbos in the room these days. Right. Got it. Absolutely. Hair clip. DJ Markison, do you like my hair clip? Good. I hope you do. Gypsy John Partridge says, I was in the gym and they played a doll for summer by Demi Lovato. She says it's LGB related, but the lyrics heavily imply grooming if you read the lyrics. I'm not at all surprised, not at all. Great day here in Herefordshire, says Jen. So I hope you are all well. Welcome to a week where we are going to be bombarded with this man. Oh, we really are. Sir David Attenborough turns 100 this week. Prepare yourself, kids. He's going to be everywhere. There's the BBC of running specials, and he's going to literally, because David Attenborough in the UK is treated like the second coming, although not around here, which is why I did a dark side deep dive to him, and which you can find on my YouTube channel, and which at the end of the show, I will put a link to it. So yeah, be prepared, just preparing you, because it's going to be nauseous. It's going to be how about he's the great animal savior and the great climate change savior and all of that. And what I revealed in my deep dive about him was that the whole thing about animals, bit problematic, doesn't always understand the needs of animals, and has done a great deal of things either to pursue a fake climate change narrative, or just for publicity, like appearing on the front of the Radio Times with a lion cub, and it was supplied by people who had been involved in kind of big game shooting and more. Horrible, horrible stuff. Don't like it. Stephen's getting his sick bucket now. Got you. And tomorrow, the trial begins for the men charged with the murder of former Lost Prophets frontman Ian Watkins. Watkins was serving a 29-year sentence for child sex offences. Just absolutely outrageous, awful ones. His fans were essentially giving him their children, or some of his fans, obviously not all of them, but some of his fans were giving him their children and he was abusing them. It's horrible, horrible stuff. Ian Watkins was stabbed in the neck at the high security Wakefield prison, often called Monster Mansion. He was pronounced dead on October the 11th, 2025. Rashid Goodell, also referred to as Rico Goodell, and Samuel Dodsworth were charged shortly after the incident. Both men are charged with murder and possession of a makeshift knife. They have pleaded not guilty. And this Thursday, elections will be held in the Scottish Parliament, in the Welsh Senedd, and English councils and local authorities. Can't really say too much about that. And you certainly can't do any promotion of any of it because there's a sort of timeout period. Not that I would be promoting any of them, frankly. I am politically homeless, and with good reason. You only have to look around us at the show around us. There's a reason why I'm politically homeless. And also on Thursday is the pre-inquest review hearing into the death of Liam Payne. That's Liam Payne, former One Direction singer. He died at the age of 31. On October the 16th, 2024, after falling from a third-floor hotel balcony in Buenos Aires, Argentina, a post-mortem examination determined the cause of death as polytrauma, resulting in internal and external hemorrhage. Toxicology reports indicated the presence of substances, including alcohol, cocaine, and a prescription antidepressant. The incident occurred at the Casa Sur Palermo Hotel in Buenos Aires, where Payne fell approximately 14 meters into an interior courtyard. Hotel staff had made an emergency call, reporting a guest overwhelmed by drugs and alcohol who was acting aggressively and destroying property. We also saw those awful images of Liam being carried from the reception back to his room shortly before this happened. Argentina authorities have ruled out a voluntary act based on evidence suggesting the singer was in a state of semi or total unconsciousness during the fall. As of late 2024, 5 people were initially linked to the investigation. Charges against 3 were later dropped, while 2 individuals faced charges for supplying drugs to Payne. And following the autopsy and preliminary investigations, Liam's body was released to his family in November 2024 to return to the UK. And many people are not happy with the conclusion. Many people are not happy at all, and believe that there is something suspicious about it. Now, that's not unusual. When famous people die in questionable circumstances, it's important to ask whether people would gain by that person no longer being here. And by all accounts, Liam was going off of the rails to a certain degree and was being quote unquote problematic to certain people. But I'm not suggesting for one second that there are people implicated in it, although others are. And on Friday, I covered Golders Green. Interesting, of course, that now more information has come out that the MSM are still insistent in ignoring the fact that Essie, or Issa, I think it's Issa you pronounce it, Issa Suleiman was also charged for a 3rd attempted murder, that man being Muslim. Of course, that doesn't appear to count because it doesn't fit in with the agenda. And there are a lot of troubling things going on here. Now, as I explained on Friday, and I was very clear about it, I am as non-bigoted as I think you will humanly find. I'm really not interested in the color of somebody's skin, or their religion or their culture. I am interested in the content of someone's character, as someone brilliant once said. And I am deeply concerned that they are using Golders Green to bring forth all manner of problematic agendas. And Sir Mark Rowley, who is the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, I've done a report before which has covered him and how deeply, deeply troubling I believe this man to be. And he has now said we need special police force to protect Jews. This proposal was submitted to the Home Office on May the 1st, so last week. And it follows, as he says, a pandemic of anti-Semitism and a series of high-profile attacks, including the double standard in Golders Green. Well, I've just mentioned a third, which lots of people have been talking about. And then what you have these sort of mainstream media gatekeepers who rush in and say, well, nobody's mentioned in the third one because it's just kind of like not part of it. And it could be contempt of court. Why would it be contempt of court? The Metropolitan Police have admitted to charging three people, to charging him with the attempted murder of three people. So very bizarre stuff. And anyway, Mark Rowley wants this special police force. And honestly, I do think people like Mark Rowley are putting a target on the backs of Jews who just want to live their life, right? They just want to get on with it. We all need protecting. But unfortunately, Mark is absolutely captured by all manner of authorities. And I'm going to be really blunt here. And somebody had started off by saying, I'm a Zionist. I hope I'm welcome. You are absolutely welcome. But that will not preclude me from saying what I have to say today. And one of the things that is deeply, deeply troubling me is to discover that an IDF soldier who has said outrageous stuff about killing children is now a doctor in Leicester. That deeply, deeply concerns me, right? It deeply concerns me. His name is Dr. Eastland Staveley. He is a GP who said he didn't shoot enough babies when he was in the IDF. This man cannot be anywhere near children or any human, frankly. I don't believe in cancel culture, but when it comes to our health, we cannot have somebody working within the NHS whose regret is that he didn't get to shoot enough babies when he was in the IDF. And that's at his own hand. That's at his own hand. He actually responded to somebody saying to him, so you're IDF, you need to be careful. People can't go off to commit war crimes. How many babies have you sniped? And he responded saying, not enough, but I'm sure they can add 2 more. And so that's not good. And people are complaining to the GMC. And rightfully so. It's not acceptable. That is literally not acceptable. We don't need people like that. And it's so ironic because you have people like Dr. David Cartland who stood up for his patients. Dr. Sam White, they stood up for their patients during C-19 and they've been struck off. But this lunatic who wants to snipe more children has not yet. He has to face disciplinary at the very, very least. What else? So obviously there is a big fallout concerning the whole Golders Green thing. It all seems extremely extreme to me, extremely extreme. And obviously there are issues across social media. We know, for example, on TikTok, I put up a short video about Golders Green, about problem, reaction, solution. I put it up on TikTok and immediately, the visibility was restricted. And then I thought, wait a second, isn't TikTok owned by Larry Ellison? Well, yes, Larry Ellison is the largest private donor to the IDF. He has recorded, they've recorded something in the region of $16 million that he has given to the IDF. And his family via Oracle, and led by son David Ellison, now controls stakes in TikTok's US operations. And they clamp down hard and heavy on any questions that are asked about the Middle East. And it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable at all. But yes, the fallout is continuing. And obviously, it is problematic. We don't want to be at war. I don't want to be at war. But I think that there are people who just keep stirring and stirring and stirring. And of course, we've talked about this before. The infiltration and the capture of our politicians and media is not acceptable. And we've seen it. And I'm sure that JODY will have plenty to say about it when he joins us shortly. And Sandi Adams, who has been with us before, she has a channel 2030 and beyond. And she's asked me to give a shout out to a gig they're doing in Exeter on May the 14th at Goffingland, and it's going to be with musician Trevor John and podcaster Emma Dunwell. And I will put a link in the description for you to go get tickets if you would so desire. I want to talk about this young lady, Candace Owens. The defamation lawsuit filed by French President Emmanuel Macron and First Lady Brigitte Macron against Candace Owens is currently active in the Delaware Superior Court. It was in court last week, and there is now a upcoming hearing, a motion to dismiss the case, obviously on behalf of Owens' team, and that's scheduled for the 22nd of June in the Superior Court of Newcastle County in April 2026. Mark Kashevitz, a prominent attorney who has frequently represented Donald Trump, withdrew from Owens' legal defense team without providing a specific reason. And the 22-count complaint filed in July 2025 accuses Owens of a relentless and unjustified smear campaign. It specifically targets her claims that Brigitte Macron was born male and is the blood relative of her husband. And Candace is facing some litigation headaches because on the 1st of May 2026, so just last week, just 4 days ago, a former security chief, Charlie Kirk, filed a separate defamation lawsuit against her, referencing a history of spreading conspiracy theories, including those about the Macrons, although many people believe that is not a conspiracy theory. And obviously, we know that President Donald Trump has publicly sided with the Macrons as one example, and kicked her under the bus and released that horrendous mock-up of a Time front cover file Person of the Year with an image of her that she had submitted to court previously when she was in rent debt, and it was an image of her being unwell, and he used that. It was horrible stuff. Anyway, Charlie Kirk's former head of security, Brian Harpel, filed this defamation lawsuit against her. And he says that he's been accused of involvement in a conspiracy to assassinate Charlie Kirk. And Harpel has publicly denied that neither he nor his team have any ties to Israel or the Mossad, which is some of the ideas that are floated about him. And he says he has traveled to dozens of countries, but never to Israel. And the problem I see here is Candace is actually repeating exactly the same behavior she did with the Macrons. And because what she does is she turns all legal correspondence into paid content. This will 100% backfire on her. I know she may get a kick from it in that moment in time, and I know she may make millions. She's getting millions of people to watch her podcast, and she gets paid per view for her promotion. She will be making millions on the back of it. But defamation is not just explicit, but can also be a case of everyone knows what you are saying. And she uses a lot of that. And then Erika Kirk had come out on Thursday, which I'm going to turn to in a second. But Candace has denied accusing Erika Kirk. But honestly, that is baloney. I mean, what was the whole Bride of Charlie series about? She has spent since September accusing all of them pretty much of complicity. And that is the reality. And I'm not convinced that she's still fully aware of what kind of doo-doo she may be in. Because the thing is that Candace and her supporters always talk about discovery. But here's what I know, having been sued for the last 5 years in the High Court, is that discovery, or we call it disclosure in the UK, discovery isn't what people think it is. People think that if you're involved in a lawsuit and you have discovery, you are then privy to everything you want to see. That's not how it works. She will only be privy to whatever is relevant to the lawsuit. And that can be troubling for her, because one of the things in a defamation lawsuit, there's a number of prongs that they have to satisfy, but one of the things that they have to satisfy is they have to prove actual malice. It's the biggest burden that on a complainant. But the problem for Candace, you see, the thing is, malice and defamation usually only relates to like one thing that somebody has said, a tweet or a podcast or whatever. And this is where it gets problematic for her. Very problematic in terms of malice, is she's done these entire series like months and months and months of making, pointed gestures and statements about people and bringing in people that she wasn't entirely sure about. This Mitch Snow character who had made claims about Brian Harple. And so I don't know how this is going to go, this one. I really don't, because she has quite literally spent hours, days, and months talking about the same thing. That in itself can reveal malice. It's not a one-off. And I know that she's now talking about, Mitch Snow, and she's separating herself from the claims, but you can't do it after the fact. You can't. And they'd sent a cease and desist, but that doesn't always have to happen in defamation claims either. So I think this is going to be a tricky one for her. I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park. Jane is not worried about Candace because she's a savvy woman. There you go. And Erika Kirk. Now, the problem we have here is, like him or loathe him, Charlie Kirk was authentic. People got the feeling that he believed in what he was talking about. And unfortunately, that is not the same for his widow, Erika. She comes over as performative and as if every move is calculated. And she put out a video where she is talking about essentially the dehumanization. She says there is a serious epidemic of dehumanization in the United States. She was speaking from the studio that Charlie used to use. She described her life over the last 7 months as quite literal hell. Her statement primarily focused on some of the attacks that she's been subjected to. She was clearly talking about Drewski when she said that she has comedians dressing up in whiteface. I have people saying I'm not fit to be CEO. Well, actually, you're not. I don't believe for a second that Erika Kirk is fit to be CEO. And I think that she's proven that. I think fireworks, pyrotechnics, and sparkly suits in the wake of your husband's death does not show that you are entirely serious. And I know that they did fireworks and pyrotechnics when he was alive, but there comes a point when you have to essentially shift what you're doing. You cannot continue in the same old way. She isn't Charlie. And people realize that. And then she also called out Candace Owens, claiming I murdered my husband. And Candace said, I never said that. And then there was this series of messages that were leaked where Candace had said that when she was having a meeting with Erika, one of the first questions she was going to ask was, did you kill your husband? That was in a private conversation. And the problem, of course, is for these people, and actually for Candace, is it's now proven that even if they have meetings with Candace, she will then go all out to make it very, very public. And that's part of her character. And that's what she's going to have to face in a court of law. And it may not work out well for her. I've said this before. It just may not work out well for her to be blabbing about it so much and to be making so much money off the back of it. And so we shall see. We shall absolutely see. Do you know what? It's weird, though. And I don't know how you all feel about this, but I'm starting to feel sorry for Erika Kirk. I actually am. Because if you step back from it all, look, I don't like her actions. I didn't like her filming herself at Charlie's coffin, all of that stuff. It's just horribly, horribly performative. But if you take it for what it is, and that if she's a widow with children and her husband was assassinated for everyone to see, then I think perhaps, me personally, I can allow her a bit of slack. I know a lot of people can't. But that's up to the individual, what they think, frankly. But I know, me personally, I'm struggling now with actually how dehumanized people are making her. I know she's not pleasant. She's, like, as I say, performative and all those things. But I think the dehumanization is very serious. That whole thing that Candace did about, about them kind of being automatons. And there was a kind of suggestion of harm to check that Erika was human. These things are troubling. They're troubling. And I think we are living in a world where people are dehumanizing others for content. So I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think that people should be called out, absolutely. And I think that Candace is one of those people who was closer to Turning Point UK than most people. She has an inside track that most people don't have. I understand she's upset. I get it. but I think that she's going to have more trouble than she's bargained for. Interesting, on Friday, Graham Linehan, the co-creator of Father Ted, had his November 2025 conviction for criminal damage overturned at London's Southwark Crown Court. Mrs. Justice Amanda Tipples overturned the conviction, stating the court could not be sure that the damage to a transgender activist phone was caused by Linehan. The case related to a confrontation on October the 19th, 2024, outside the Battle of Ideas conference in London, where Linehan was accused of damaging the phone of 17-year-old activist Sophia Brooks. The judge noted that Brooks's initial report to the police did not mention damage to the phone, and it wasn't until November the 7th, 2024, that she took the device to an Apple store for an assessment of damage. They're saying she. You know, I'm not with that. Linehan was found not guilty of the offence, and a previous fine of £500 along with costs was dismissed. Speaking outside the court, Graham Linehan welcomed the decision, but stated the case should never have got to court. He accused the police of failing in their duty to investigate properly and of supporting one side over the other in the debate surrounding trans issues, claiming this highlighted two-tier policing. And that would all be fine if later in the day, Graham Linehan hadn't cozied up to this pair. Lord Toby Young and Kemi Badenoch. Badenoch, I think is for proper pronouncement. So he's now cozying up to them. This picture was taken on Friday. Toby Young supported Graham Linehan, but this wasn't about a free speech issue. This was about allegations of harassment, but they've jumped on the bandwagon because Kemi Badenoch is so keen to jump on this bandwagon. It was Kemi Badenoch who had proposed for Toby Young to become a lord, and now they're all working together. And Kemi Badenoch is now saying we need to kill cancel culture. Free speech cannot survive if the process becomes the punishment. This is why I asked Toby Young to review the laws that are stifling free speech so the next Conservative government can put an end to this wasting of our resources. And again, the Graham Linehan case was nothing to do with free speech, but it's very useful. They love jumping on bandwagons, these people. They absolutely do. So that appears to me there to be something of an unholy trinity. And I have previously supported Graham. I previously had, but some of his pronouncements of late to do with Israel are really quite shocking and disgusting. And so support withdrawn. And that what happened on Friday ain't nout to do with free speech. And just before I welcome in my first guest, I want to briefly talk about this. This is interesting. And that is UK police conducted a massive raid on the headquarters of a religious group known as the Ahmadi Religion of Peace and Light in Crewe, Cheshire last week. More than 500 police officers from multiple forces executed warrants at the group's headquarters, Webb House, and 2 other properties in Crewe. While the group has roots in Shia Islam, its beliefs are widely considered heretical and have been rejected by mainstream Muslims. The investigation was triggered by a former female member who reported serious offences dating back to 2023, including rape, sexual assault, forced marriage and modern slavery. 10 people, 7 men, 3 women were arrested on suspicion of these offences. Suspects include the group's leader, Abdullah Hashem, along with members of British, Mexican, Italian, Spanish, German, Swedish and Egyptian nationalities. It's the United Nations there. And by 1st of May, all 10 suspects were released on bail. And however, interim slavery and trafficking risk orders were granted against Hashem and 4 others, banning them from entering Crewe or contacting the alleged victim. A further 25 people were charged with public order offences after obstructing police during the raids. And it's obviously deeply troubling. About 150 members, including 56 children, live at the high security Webb House compound. And the group has previously faced legal actions or bans in countries like Malaysia, Egypt, Algeria, and Sweden. And it moved its headquarters to the UK in 2021. And we should ask why the UK and England is seen as a safe haven. This is not okay. This is not acceptable at all. And authorities and mainstream Muslim organizations have stressed that this is a criminal investigation into individuals and not an investigation of the religion itself. I'm going to bring in JODY McIntyre now. And after JODY, I want to talk about Raja Miah. Raja we've had on before. Raja was one of the original people to bust the grooming gangs. And Raja has come out about Restore Britain, Rupert Lowe's grooming gang inquiry. And it's very interesting stuff because we are not biased around here. Whichever way the news falls, be it about Muslims, be it about Jews, be it about Christians, you name it, I'll cover it. Right. On that note, I want to bring in my first guest. I believe he's here. Here he is. JODY McIntyre. How are you, JODY?
Good morning, Sonia. I'm very good. How are you?
Well, I'm grand, actually. We're here working on Bank Holiday Monday, but that's cool. I'm good with that. I'm very good with that. It's really good to have you with us as per. You've been doing some stunning investigative work. JODY, of course, is an investigative journalist and something of a political man as well. You went up against, I think, Jess Phillips, didn't you, in election time?
Yes, I did. It was a very close race. I think it was just under 700 votes between us.
Really?
Which is somewhat of a miracle when you consider I was a person with no previous experience of electoral politics whatsoever, going up against a very well-oiled Labour Party machine. Now, the funny thing about that campaign is obviously because it was such a shock result to many and such a close result in the end, I was congratulated by the candidates of all the other parties standing in the constituency, and I thought that the Labour candidate would show some kind of humility in her victory speech, considering that I'd significantly slashed her majority, but instead she took the opportunity to attack and smear my campaign, which I think is going to come back to haunt the Labour Party next time round.
That's really interesting because I remember footage and I remember, I think, you and your supporters booing her in the series of events. When did that happen?
So at the count, to be honest, a number of Labour Party candidates who won by close margins got booed,
Right.
primarily because of the Labour Party's support for the genocide in Gaza. So, for example, shortly before my result, the Labour Party candidate for Hodge Hill, which is a neighbouring constituency, called Liam Byrne, he got booed, and the independent candidate standing against him actually turned his back to him in protest. So this was the reason they were getting booed was abundantly clear to anyone there, and people in the crowd, for example, were chanting "Free Palestine" and they chanted my name as well. Now, whether you agree with the booing or don't agree with it, that's fine. That's a matter of opinion. But Jess Phillips characterized this as a misogynistic hate campaign against her, which is totally disingenuous. And I actually noticed in one of the interviews, she said, "Oh, I noticed that the male candidates didn't receive the same treatment," which again is just totally untrue.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for your take on that, JODY. I think that's important because it was very selective. It was cherry picked. It appeared that she was the brunt of it all, but you're saying everybody was kind of subject to the same thing.
Honestly, Sonia, it's a totally fabricated narrative that came out of that
I'm
night.
that shocked.
As I said, I was sitting on the stage, and honest from the bottom of my heart, I was expecting, because, I received over 10,000 votes, and we can assume that the vast majority or many of those people, thousands of those people, are people who have voted for Labour, who have
Right,
voted for
right,
Just Phillips
right.
for many, many years. And she, was basically castigating these people as hateful. And, she made a number of kind of accusations about her activists having their car tires slashed and all these sorts of accusations, which, if she had made them directly about me, may have been defamation case, but
Right,
because
right,
she said it in
right,
a general
right.
way, it just became a narrative that got picked up by the media.
Well, I'm very grateful to have cleared that up finally. I
Yeah.
meant to ask you about that last time you came on. So thank you for addressing that. Of course, I didn't bring you on to talk about that. I brought
And
you on, but I'm glad you have addressed that. I think that's important because it was a very one sided account of what took place. But I want very much to talk about this man, Sir
yeah,
Keir Rodney Starmer. JODY, you've done, I think, exemplary investigative work to do with Keir Starmer, and your latest thread is a whopper, absolute
right.
whopper. And you talk extensively about, obviously, Keir Starmer, his involvement with the Israeli lobby. That's very important. I want to also talk to you about Morgan McSweeney, the involvement of Peter Mandelson. You can take it away wherever you want to, and I will pick up from you, JODY. Where do you want to start?
Okay, so I would say that I think it's now quite widely seen that Keir Starmer is essentially an Israel lobby plant who's been deliberately installed at the very highest level of the British government. Now, as you said, this is something that I've been researching and writing about for quite a long time. But sometimes the actors themselves um, do more to tell the story through their own actions. So in the last few days, we saw that an individual in London who suffers from psychological illness, who clearly should have been in a secure facility. Maybe there's questions as to why he wasn't in a secure facility. Took it upon himself to stab an acquaintance of his, a Muslim man. Then he went to Golders Green in North London and stabbed two Jewish people. A horrible, tragic thing,
Oh,
horrible thing to
disgusting.
happen.
Appalling.
And thankfully, no one was killed. Now, as we know, I grew up in London, and London has a very serious knife crime problem. There's over 50,000 stabbings a year. There's stabbings in London on a daily basis,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying that to denigrate London. It's just a fact.
It's just the
Just
fact
a
that
fact.
there are
Yeah,
4 knife related hospitalizations a day in London.
exactly. I mean, I grew up in South London, which has a very large Afro-Caribbean population, and there's a lot of stabbings there. And a
Yes,
lot of
fact. Fact.
people were killed. A lot of teenagers, a lot of young people were killed. But this time, forget the Muslim victim because he hasn't even featured in even the police reports. Forget the fact that this man is now charged with 3 attempted murders.
Correct.
The only thing that's been reported is that 2 Jewish people were stabbed in Golders Green. What has Keir Starmer done in response to that? He called a Cobra meeting. He's raised the national terror threat, and the head of the police has called for a special unit to be created within the Metropolitan Police solely for the purpose of defending the Jewish community. This is insane. This is ridiculous. The man was psychologically unwell. He
And with
should,
previous convictions for violence.
yes, he
Ridiculous.
previously stabbed a police officer
And a dog.
and a dog, the
Yeah.
police dog. He went to prison. He's developed a mental illness, and now he stabbed 3 more people. This is insane. And furthermore, Keir Starmer wants to somehow link this to pro-Palestine marches in London. And I saw him talking about, this is something I really take major objection to, saying that he said that if you're with someone who says globalize the intifada, then you're calling for the murder of Jews around the world. Coincidentally, I've seen Jess Phillips giving an interview on the same subject where she couldn't even pronounce the word intifada, the word she's talking about. These people don't speak Arabic. They don't know what the word means. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's a very good reflection of their almost abject servitude to the Israeli state. And this is something that is a constant denominator. If you look at Keir Starmer's rise to power and route to power, for example, his leadership campaign, one of the major funders to his leadership campaign was a lobbyist called Trevor Chin. Trevor Chin was speaking at a Labour Friends of Israel event in 2013, and he said, I've spent my entire life working for Israel, for a better image for Israel, for success for Israel. He didn't say, I've spent my entire life working for the Labour Party. He didn't even say, I've spent my entire life working for the Jewish community of Britain. He said, I've spent my entire life working for Israel, a foreign state that should have nothing to do with us. Even Trevor Chin was also a director and a funder of Labour Together when Morgan McSweeney was in charge. And we now know that Morgan McSweeney used Labour Together as a vehicle to propel Keir Starmer into power. And the main thing they were concerned about in the Labour Party was having a leader who was critical of the Israeli state. And, a key thing about Morgan McSweeney, because obviously he's someone who's had major coverage in the mainstream media over the last 6 months. And the precipitator to this coverage was the fact that he concealed over £700,000 of donations to Labour Together, and they were subsequently received a small fine, £14,000 or so. But what a lot of newspapers haven't covered is that one of the main reasons he concealed the donations was to protect people like Trevor Chin, because he knew that if people knew that pro-Israeli lobbyists who had funded Labour Friends of Israel and Conservative Friends of Israel for many years were pumping money into this project, he knew that people would know what the project was really about. So this influence of the Israel lobby, into the Labour Party specifically, and to the British political establishment as a whole, is really insidious and really dangerous. And the Labour Party are on course for possibly some of the worst electoral results they've ever
You
had.
think so this week?
Well, the Labour Party predicted in the local elections on Thursday to lose 75%, up to 2,000
Wow.
council seats. And you know, I remember when the genocide in Gaza commenced, and Keir Starmer gave his famous interview on LBC, where he said that Israel had the right to cut off water and electricity to the civilian population of Gaza. The Labour Party were warned, and I know there's other communities, but the Labour Party were warned that they were going to lose major support from the Muslim community because of this issue. And a senior Labour source was quoted as saying, it's like we're shaking off the fleas. That's what he said. He said, we're shaking off the fleas. Who cares? Now, Keir Starmer knows
Extraordinary.
that this slavish support for the Israeli state is going to bring Labour to its knees. And it's almost as if he'd rather sacrifice Labour as an institution than stand up to the lobbyists who paid for him to get into power.
Well, that's the thing, because it runs so deep, doesn't it? This is in all of our institutions now. These lobbyists, they're everywhere, whether it's the Fabians or whether it's, Labour is the Fabians, of course. And that is the problem, is it runs so deep. So he may well have to essentially fall on his sword as well. But this has been going on a long time with him. This is not something new, right? Your work also talked about, I think, when he was DPP and receiving gifts, correct?
Yes, so when he was head of the CPS, there was one foreign state attorney he met, and surprise, surprise, that was the Israeli state attorney. This is not a coincidence, he was clearly sending signals from a very early stage of whose interests he would serve once he got into power. And that's continued up to the present day.
Who is this guy then? What's his name?
That's was the Israeli state attorney at that time, and his name is Moshe Lador. So Starmer met with him, accepted gifts from him, and as I say, there's no other foreign state attorney in the world he met. This is the only one he met with.
Extraordinary. You also recount how 3 months after meeting with this man, Starmer blocked an arrest warrant. What was that about?
Correct. So there was a private case. So at the time, and this dates back, I think, to General Pinochet from Chile. There was the ability to prosecute war criminals in the UK, even if they'd committed their crimes in another jurisdiction. So Zippy Livni was the Israeli foreign minister at the time, and there was a private prosecution brought against her in the UK for war crimes. And obviously this was an embarrassment or an awkward situation for the British government. So they changed the law. They changed the law on prosecuting war criminals to ensure, and it was specifically to ensure that this would not happen to any Israeli minister again.
That's
And I
extraordinary.
mean, we know now Benjamin Netanyahu is wanted by the International Criminal Court. He's come to the UK. He's met with David Lammy. He's met with the leadership of the Labour Party. So it's very much people talk about two-tier or this and that. The Israeli state are in a whole tier of their own as far as the British government are
And
concerned.
the thing is, if I felt that this was just bias speak, I would call you on it. But I agree with you. It's been my observations. It's been the evidence that I've gathered, and it goes back a very long way. And it's deep in the fabric of our society now, this support for Israeli lobbyists and the fact that our MPs are bought and paid for. I don't necessarily want to get too far away from Starmer, because I want to come back and talk about Mandelson. But what do you think about people like Kemi Badenoch? She's just not representing England, is she?
You know what? I've thought about this question a lot in terms of why is it that the particular, I mean, all of the British political parties really are united on this issue. And I think part of it is fear. I think politicians know that if you criticize the Israeli state, if you go against Israeli interests, they will end your career. And it's happened to so many people. For example, Alan Duncan is a famous example. Alan Duncan was a Conservative minister under Boris Johnson, and he alleges that I think he said the Israeli embassy in London essentially blocked him from becoming foreign minister. So this is a real thing. It's certainly not a
Had he spoken
conspiracy
out?
theory.
Why did he believe that? Had he spoken out?
Yeah. So he was known. He was known to be a kind of pro-Palestinian,
Right,
a critic of the
right,
Israeli state. He
right.
was known, and it's like, for example, that there was a documentary a few years ago called "The Lobby," where an undercover journalist,
I remember it. Joan Ryan was caught out, wasn't she?
yeah, talking about £1 million payment from an Israeli intelligence officer who was working at the embassy, and the Alan Duncan case is mentioned in that documentary as well. So I think part of it is fear. Is, for example, you get Labour politicians and Conservative politicians from all sorts of constituencies around the country who are members of Labour Friends of Israel and Conservative Friends of Israel. You have to ask the question, what does Israel have to do with a constituency in Yorkshire or in the Midlands or in Kent or in Northumberland or wherever it is?
Just to interject there, I feel the same way about really anything. I think anything to do with English politics should be about England. And in that, I also include Palestine as example, because I don't believe, don't get me wrong, we absolutely should be protesting against what has taken place, 100%. But I don't believe that our politics should be hijacked by any outside influence.
Well, I think there's one key difference, and that key difference is we're arming the Israelis and we're not arming
Understood.
the Palestinians.
Fair point. Okay, I take that.
So I think, often, sometimes that question is asked of me, kind of posed in that way. But the point is, we are involved. We are involved. Yeah, there's no the other side of the argument that the government will give is that the Israeli state is a key ally.
Yes.
My argument would be it shouldn't be an ally because they don't benefit our interests. They're a major threat to global peace, and they actually severely damage our standing and reputation in the world. The Israeli state is now a pariah state. Their political leaders are wanted for war crimes.
100%.
There's no reason we should be allied with them.
I understand. Do you consider the Israeli lobby to be the foremost and the priority external influence operating on the UK? Is there any other that you consider?
Look, there are all different types of lobbyists who make donations, but I believe the pro-Israel lobby is the most influential force
Right,
in British politics. And I
right.
think I mean, obviously this goes both for Labour and the Conservatives, but if you look at the Labour Party, particularly from Tony Blair onwards, when Tony Blair was first elected to Parliament, one of the first things he did is he first elected in 1983. One of the first things he did was join Labour Friends of Israel. Much of his rise to power was bankrolled by a man called Michael Levy, who they nicknamed Lord Cashpoint,
I remember.
and he raised over £100 million for Labour. And Tony Blair met Michael Levy. A lot of people don't know this. Tony Blair met Michael Levy at a dinner party hosted by a senior Israeli embassy officer in London. The Israel lobby is the most influential force on British politics at the moment, and all of the evidence backs that up.
I mean, that's what my work has concluded. And I'm open to somebody changing my mind and giving me evidence to the contrary. But it would appear that the Israeli lobby is all powerful. And actually, over the last week, we've seen how powerful. It has been an absolute onslaught from politicians and media and the assets in media. It's outrageous. This is not journalism by anybody's stretch of anybody's imagination. So let me ask you about what is going on with Peter Mandelson at the moment, because obviously a lot of crazy stuff. He ended up they had to get rid of him from being the US ambassador. He should never have been the US ambassador in the first place. They knew, right? They knew from their own vetting it was a problem. Why were they so keen to have Mandelson in that role, do you think?
Well, I think I like the way you've worded it, because they work in, and I think that the reality of the situation is they appointed Peter Mandelson because of who he is, and not despite who he is, or not
Right,
knowing
right,
who he is.
right.
It's just an absolute hypocrisy for Keir Starmer to be trying to brush this under the carpet. And I think that is the intent now, is to try and move on from this scandal as quickly as possible. I saw Morgan McSweeney being interviewed by the Foreign Select Affairs Committee the other day, and that's the kind of vibe I was getting. Let's move on from this, let's talk about something else. One of the articles I wrote in the last few days, I was highlighting that Labour Together, the think tank that was kind of at the centre of a lot of these scandals. Okay, Morgan McSweeney is not a director of that think tank anymore, but it's still operating as a limited company. And again, it's still, I mean, I'm sorry to keep connecting it to the same
I mean,
issue, but
it
I
is what
think
it
it is.
is.
I think I'm not making these things up, and I think it is important for people to know. So Labour Together is still operating as a limited company. In March of that, I went onto the Electoral Commission website. In March, they received £500,000 in donations from 3 donors. One of them was David Sainsbury, or Lord Sainsbury, who I can't remember the exact amount. It was over £100,000, certainly. And he's someone who Tony Blair and his wife used to attend Labour Friends of Israel fundraising events, and David Sainsbury would be seated at one of the top tables. So I think this is the way that Starmer's Labour operates. It's
Right,
just
right,
total impunity
right,
for corruption,
right.
appointing these, quite extremely unsavoury characters into senior positions, and then just saying, "Oh, it didn't cross my desk." I mean, a couple of days ago, the latest kind of Labour corruption story is that they deselected two black councillors in Croydon to make way for Keir Starmer's niece, and now they're saying maybe he didn't know he had a niece.
It's always the same way, isn't it? Like you say, these things apparently never cross his desk. We heard that when he was director of, of public prosecutions, the whole idea that Jimmy Savile, who had been reported to at least 8 police forces when he was alive, had never crossed Keir Starmer's desk. So it is kind of like, I think the whole thing is a plausible deniability, isn't it? Largely, I think that's what he operates on. Jody, before you leave us this morning, I was in education with you. What is currently interesting you? What's on your table for this week?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I've been looking into Andy Burnham, for one,
Mayor of
because
Manchester.
he seems to be the new. Apparently, he's going to be the great saviour of the Labour Party. I would suggest that he's a kind of disciple of Tony Blair. The thing I've been doing for the last couple of weeks, actually, I've been reporting from Birmingham Crown Court, where a man is on trial for, I'm not making this up, he's on trial for a series of social media posts. And on the basis of those social media posts, he's being charged with encouraging terrorism, essentially.
Wow.
And also he's been charged with inviting support for a prescribed organization, namely Hamas. Now, bear in mind, the social media posts don't specify Hamas by name. They express
Interesting.
support for the Palestinian resistance. The defendant side of the story is that I support all Palestinian resistance, including armed resistance, which they have the right to under international law. The prosecution side of the argument is that when you use the word resistance, you are using that as a code word for Hamas.
Right.
But let's take the politics out of it. I know people have different opinions on the question of Palestine. Aside from that, the prosecution are seeking up to 10 years in prison
Wow.
on the basis of social media posts. There's no other
Wow.
accusation. There's no accusation of violence. There's no accusation of material support for a proscribed organization. The charges are solely based on social media posts. And I was sitting in Birmingham Crown Court watching the prosecution bring up memes on the screen and thinking about how much taxpayers' money has gone into prosecuting this individual. And, I heard someone saying, at least we still have juries. Because you can imagine the next thing they want to do is do these kind of trials without juries. So it's
Yeah.
a couple of other stories as well. But
Great
that's fine.
stuff. Great stuff. Jody, thank you, says London Lady. And so say all of us. Yes, Herbert, thought crime has been entrenched for at least a decade. Monopods, does Jody have a Substack? You have a Substack, right?
Yes, I do. JODY McIntyre.substack.
I will send me the link. I will put it in the description. Thank you for joining us this morning. As I say, it's always an education. Everybody, investigative journalist Jody McIntyre, who clearly has a very busy week ahead of him. Lovely to have you with us, Jody. Take good care of
Thank you
yourself.
so much. Anytime.
Take care. Good to have you with us. Always good to have Jody with us. And I'm really a big fan of his work. And because it's forensic, actually, and it goes so deep into the history of numerous people, including Sir Keir Rodney Starmer, who is really not a man that I could support in any shape, really. My next guest is here, and I'm delighted to see him. And so I am going to bring him on without further ado, because let's talk about something completely different, Lance. Something completely different. Lance Shuttler, you're joining us from the US, and it's lovely to have you with us. Where are you in the US, Lance?
Well, thank you for having me, Sonia. I'm down here in beautiful Florida.
Oh, I love Florida. Wonderful. Floridian sunshine. I mean,
Yes.
what's not to love about it, really? Thank you for being here with us. You're a man of, well, you've got an interesting history. And unfortunately, once I started looking into your story, Lance, I realized that you're one of those people like me. Often you learn through the hard knocks of life, right? It's the trauma that puts you on a different path. And I think that's a fair description, really, of what you endured to do with your father. I think your father was sick, right? And it made you really look at our health in a different way. Have I got that correct?
Yeah, that's right, Sonia. So back in 2008, I was a freshman in college and I was away from school or away from home, rather, at school. And I got word from my family that my dad wasn't doing the best mentally. Um, he wasn't ever really on pharmaceuticals, never took anything, didn't have an interest in that stuff. But one winter, he just was not doing well. So he went to his doctor, put on an antidepressant, and then within 4 or 5 months, he was switched a handful of times. And so then that led to one day out of nowhere in the spring of 2008, him taking his life. And,
So
you know,
sorry.
yeah, thank you. And, I know it's all okay in the end. It's definitely helped me to wake up
I
and,
understand.
yeah, and to start to address these bigger issues that we've all been facing, especially in healthcare and medicine and how they've um, really weaponize that against we the people of the whole world.
I mean, this is absolutely true. You're the CEO of your own company, Ascent Nutrition. And I think one of the things that I really like about your approach is a holistic approach. And we have so little of it in our world. In the NHS, if you have a pain in your leg, they treat you for a pain in the leg. If you have a pain in your head, they treat you for a pain in the head. Whereas you're all about the big picture, aren't you? Because you understand the links between nutrition and our cognitive functioning. I mean, you do understand that. And I don't think that in our world, in our healthcare, there is enough made about this issue. I mean, talk to me about some of your discoveries in this field, in this area, because I think your expertise is quite extensive. And I think it would be very useful for many of our viewers who also might at some stage be suffering some depression to understand the links perhaps to nutrition and how we can improve that.
Yeah, definitely, Sonia. So I'll come to that and I'll kind of lead into it. So something that I like to share, and I know that you're on YouTube, so I won't use some specific
Very
words, but I'll
wise. Thank
yeah,
you.
yes, absolutely. I'll just hold up the book. I've got it right here. So this book was my red pill that woke me up to all the stuff, including, the whole like general corruption of everything that's been going on in the world. So I'm just gonna hold up the book. I'm not gonna say it.
Got you.
Um, but it's a big, thick book written by Dr. Peter Duesberg. People can look that up if they would like. And I was in a college class in 2010. So this was about a year and a half after my father passed. I was taking an anatomy and physiology class in the summer. It was online, and I was basically just trying to get credits throughout the summer and just, try to finish early. And uh, it was broken down by 15 weeks. This class was very boring and basic stuff. So cardiovascular system week 1, nervous system week 2, so forth. But week 8, and this was in the syllabus too, it was called, again, I won't say it, but Inventing the AV of what I just showed, that book. And um, that it was quite transformative because that professor was speaking about this issue and all the issues surrounding it, but not pushing it in any sort of like conspiratorial way. Even back then, it was more just him presenting evidence and information that we needed to then go through and learn and decipher through and kind of address and the questions he was asking. He was definitely gently leading us down the path to wake up to all this stuff. Um, it was the big red pill moment for me. And so that shifted everything in terms of what I was interested in and what I was doing. So I was studying health science and I continued on that path. But I started to see things through a new lens because I learned, and it didn't happen all at once, but it started with this book. Everything that you talk about, Sonia, and that we know that so many things are corrupted these days and really messed up, and they've been actively seeking to destroy us and doing it through medicine. So, just one of the means. So that's kind of where the stage was set for me to get all this knowledge and information and really kind of have a purpose with it. Meaning, I could see that there was some really dark, sick things going on, and now we've lived through, a lot of these things. And I knew that I had to do something to just try to wake people up and also just not sit back and just let things happen. So that for me was a huge turning point. I went all in. I remember consciously sitting there on my couch reading this book and going, wow, if I go down this path, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen because at the time I was only 19.
Wow.
And
Very young to get an awakening like that.
Yes. And, um, it was, I took the red pill. I'm like, I don't care. I
Right.
know that this is true.
Right.
There's so much information in here in this book that's true. You can't debate it. And okay, I need to know what's going on. And so that for me kind of began the process of me going down all the rabbit holes and learning about all the things. And health and wellness was, just always kind of an interest and passion of mine. And so it kind of just naturally led to me um, learning about the deeper issues of health and wellness and how they've, again, weaponized everything against us to make us more sick.
I mean, that is the reality. We are more sick than ever. We should, with all the advances in technology, be healthier than ever. I did a documentary in 2019 called The Business of Cancer, which the description of what it's about is literally that, the business of cancer. But it's also about how the treatments that they give us are not really working in our favor. And it all seems to be upside down and inverted. And how by this time, I said, 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer. Well, now that's what they're telling us. But of course, and again, we're on YouTube, they're missing out what has happened over the last 5-6 years that could have contributed to that. And now my viewers are savvy enough to know exactly what I'm talking about, because we all know that the problems we're dealing with in terms of censorship and everything. So those rabbit holes, they are important. We are sicker than ever. It's crazy. So that it makes sense that somebody like you exists who's able to join up the dots, because as I said to you earlier, the way our NHS, our National Health Service, approaches health is everything is separated, but it's not. Everything is linked. And that's why I'm very interested in the whole idea of nutrition, of good cognitive function, just of overall well-being. Lance, how much does food and drink play in terms of our good or bad health?
So much. I wish I could give a number exactly, but I mean, it's the foundation of who and what we are.
We
If
are
you think
what we
about,
eat.
yeah, exactly. If you think about our cells, I mean, we all know it. We need nutrients. These are like little building blocks for our cells. And so if we give our body the good building blocks, cells, theoretically should function as they normally should in a healthy state. Um, so, the whole nutritional aspect and everything that they've done to hurt us has been kind of stacked up against us, but thankfully, we are resilient. Human beings naturally are resilient, and we've had no choice but to be resilient, especially in the face of what's been going on the past 5 or 6 years. Yes, the things that are sometimes put into people's bodies absolutely have contributed to this whole rising of the or lowering of health, I guess you could say, across the world. But information flows, and people are getting good information, and we're going to still keep spreading good information. And that's how we counter all this stuff.
If we can. I mean, in the UK, the clampdown on social media is extraordinary. I don't know if you're aware of it, but our freedom of speech is so limited in the UK. It's actually troubling. I mean, the guest before you was actually talking about somebody who's facing up to, I think he said 10 years for a social media post. So these things are very, very concerning. And I don't think for a second they want us to spread this type of information, because our politicians are in bed with big pharmaceutical companies and that entire machinery. But the other thing that I think is really important with your work, again, it is about the holistic picture, and that includes globally. You're looking at the entire global picture, the global enslavement picture, and the impact that is having on humanity. And I think, again, that's quite unique in its own way. Some people, they just sell supplements and that's it, but you're really looking at the big picture. Very important. Tell me a little bit about that and why it's so important to you to link all these things.
Yeah. The short of it, Sonia, is because of kind of what I've been sharing, that I woke up and I realized that, okay, they're using everything against us.
Everything.
And including health, and they want us sick, they want us weak, mentally weak, physically weak, all of it. And so, after learning about this stuff, I just kind of decided to go all in on just learning as much as I could and connecting the dots for myself first, so I could understand what was going on. And as I did, I could see, oh, okay, I know that so many people around me do not know this stuff. So I have to start spreading this information. I have to get the word out there. So, the thing that I did at the beginning was really just implement into my life. And yes, I would try to tell people things, but you know how it goes. And I quickly learned, when you try to tell things to people that they're not asking for, and if they're not ready for it, like, there's just no point. A seed planted, but that's about it.
But
Go
that
ahead.
can be enough, though. Sometimes one word, one statement, one sentence can change somebody for life. So it can be enough. But you're also, to a degree, you are battling a deeply unhealthy society. The level of obesity, for example, in the US is off the chart, isn't it? So you're battling quite a lot of ignorance as well. You have big food, big pharma. They have all the money to keep pumping out all this information to people. Do this, do that, do it this way, eat this, all that kind of stuff. So it's an uphill slog, isn't it, from your position?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, yeah, we're still dealing with censorship here in the US in some of our own ways. I don't think it's as harsh as what you all are dealing with and what the Canadians are dealing with. I mean, it's unbelievable. So we're trying to do what we can do to liberate our country, and then, try to help others too. I do think that's happening, and it's coming. You can see good things taking place in that realm. I mean, here in the US, not to segue too much, but definitely there are a lot of good things happening. And people are claiming their freedom back.
So you see that those changes happening, because I often say that, as heinous as the last 6 years were, the whole C-19 narrative, all of that, it's the awakening that I cling on to. How many more people who weren't previously awake? I often use the example of my neighbors. As adorable as they are, they were as asleep as you could humanly get. They couldn't wait for their jabs and the boosters and everything. But bit by bit, it's like the scales have fallen from their eyes. They're really starting to understand there are all these extraordinary agendas working. And I think C-19 was a tipping point for many people. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. And definitely here in the US as well. I think everywhere across the world, and certainly here too. The awakening is spreading. We know that. We can see it, but it is challenging for us who've been awake of like, all right, come on, let's go. Let's start arresting people because we know that these people are just walking around committing crimes. Any of us did that, we'd have been put in prison years ago. We still got people walking around freely, and I know it's the same there in the
Outrageous.
UK. And I was listening to the last probably 15 minutes of you and Jody, and I mean, yeah, it's crazy what Keir Starmer has gotten away with, and all of his friends and all that. But I think what's going on is that a lot of these quote unquote global leaders, global losers, because there are, and they're way worse than that, as you know. They're being put in the spotlight so that we as humanity can see them one last time for who they are and let them show us who they are. Uh, the
Ooh, good
whole,
point.
yeah,
Yeah. I
and
like that. I like that. Like, yes. Okay.
yes, and so here in the U.S., as an example, a lot of people are very critical of uh, uh, Trump and specifically that some of the people he's got around him.
Yeah.
Um, I support President Trump. I believe what's going on is he's putting his enemies out right in the spotlight, just like he did even years ago. It's been a long, ongoing sort of operation, but he cast out, Fauci and Deborah Birx and all these psychopaths right into the spotlight so that as this awakening has continued and now we're on this side of things, years later, we are awaking much more quickly, and people are here in the US and I know are all around the world, especially here, calling for Fauci to now be indicted. They've got 7 days to do so, otherwise his 5 year expiration time goes. I don't think that's going to apply. I honestly don't think, Sonia, that they're going to indict him in the next week.
I was
And
reading his pardon from Biden. It's an extraordinary piece of literature. It really is. But you don't think they're going to indict him?
I don't think they're going to
They
do it
can't.
in the next week, even though we're seeing a lot of good things happening within the DOJ. They indicted Fauci's right hand man. And, by the way, Fauci's littered in this book and other names too. Um, but what I think is going on is it's actually going to just show even more, especially to the people in the US and around the world, that okay, all of our systems are broken. We know that, but we have to sometimes see it again and again and again and again in a really difficult way, which is, you've got this mass criminal. I'd like to say other words, but we're on YouTube.
Yeah, right.
Uh, a
But
mass
go on.
criminal. Yeah. And um, I think we have to see that the whole systems completely break down, and not where the world goes into chaos, but that you've got this guy who, like, everyone knows who he is and what he did, and you can't even bring charges against him. And so I think what it's going to do is show that, okay, some people in the DOJ itself, some people in the Supreme Court itself, they all need arrested too because they've been complicit in these crimes.
I mean, it's really interesting for me. One of the reasons I do wake up is that I really like to hear other opinions. I think that's so important. I don't agree with you about Trump, by the way, but you are absolutely entitled to hold that opinion, that belief that it's playing the long game. My thing, one of the reasons I felt that fell down, the whole idea of him playing 5D chess or whatever, was the whole father of the vaccine thing. The fact that even in recent times, he's talked about what an astonishing feat it was. And again, we have to be careful with YouTube. But what can you say that's kind of YouTube friendly in response to that? What do you think about that?
Um, yeah, it's a very tricky, difficult topic. I also did not like when he said that stuff. No one did. Um, the only thing, and I don't know this for a fact, so this is me just guessing, um, but and also hoping and praying, and not in a naive way, but I really do believe that there's you know, higher level games being played, and it's just taken just a long time to play out. You know, we were all banking on these people being arrested, and you know, the patriots coming in and arresting these criminals all around the world.
Right.
You know, potentially some of it's been done quietly, and they have to kind of stack it up to roll it out. Who knows? I think with that situation that you're talking about with the needles and whatnot, it's probably so deep that, like, yeah, I can try to justify it.
I
I do,
understand. But we can
it's
also
hard.
like people and also
Yeah.
accept that they can foul up as well, right? We
Yep.
can do that. I mean, I actually think it's time we start to have more adult conversations, because all I ever see on social media is people taking against somebody just for like one opinion. And it feels insane. And I want to always have conversations with people that I don't necessarily agree with. And I agree with almost everything you say except that, but that's cool as well. We
Yeah.
can do that. We are allowed to disagree. It would be I think it's a strange world if we force ourselves to agree with everything that everyone says. Lance, before you leave us, what would be your one good health tip if somebody is really keen to get themselves on track in a simple way that doesn't involve a lot of money? It doesn't involve, you know, extra equipment or anything. How could they get cracking?
Okay, so I'll share a few things because they all kind of relate, and it's all free, all very free. So, um, and I love sharing this stuff because I was a health coach, and I know, like, and this is how I would do things: is first give people the free and actionable things they can do to implement. Don't ask people to spend money, because like that's not what I'm trying to do. I want people, because I had to do
Right.
this myself,
Right.
figure out the things that you can do. So, few simple things. Try to get sunlight in the morning. Even if it's cloudy and gray, there's still enough light coming through the clouds to where, even if it's just a couple minutes outside, not through a window, not through, you know, whatever, you have to get outside, do it. Just get light in your eyes. Definitely helps. Another thing is grounding or earthing. That's free. Now we're, you know, coming into springtime, having your feet on the grass or on concrete. Very beneficial. You know, like, I won't go into the whole science of that, but that's absolutely real.
Even on concrete.
Yes. As long as that concrete is, you know, on or above dirt.
Right. Got you.
Yep. Um, a
Sunlight
few,
and grounding, two really important things. So obviously we get vitamin D, don't we, from the sun, and we're so lacking that. Actually, I think that's probably one of a major supplement that people often go after because they're in need of it. But yes, carry on. This is interesting, fascinating stuff.
yes.
Get healthy.
And then, so a few things like with light and the nighttime. So first is the phone. So turn down the brightness on your phone. So I've got mine down all of the way, and you can train your eyes very quickly to not need it, you know, full brightness or even half brightness on these phones. If I need it a little bit brighter, I'll make a couple clicks and turn it up a little bit, but it massively helps. We know the blue light impacts our brain, our sleep, all of that. And so, kind of relating and going into sleep and nighttime is, you know, just that again, turn your phone's brightness way, way down, especially at night, because I mean, you know, if you're getting sleepy and then you look at your phone that's full lit, you're wide awake, and it'll keep you awake. And so, it's kind of stacking with that is, have your phone off, like the Wi-Fi or the internet aspect of your phone. Turn that off into airplane mode. You can still have an alarm set. You know, I woke up this morning with my phone off, like the air, or is in airplane mode, but my alarm still went off. So people can do that, you know, very easy to do. Keep the Wi-Fi, turn it into airplane mode, and keep it at least 6 feet away from your head. A lot of people
Yes.
will have their
Yes.
phone on and sleeping next to it. Yes, I've done it before. But I can tell you truthfully, Sonia, I've been very conscious of this stuff for 15 years.
Wow.
And so I've just gotten into a routine with things. So I keep my phone outside of my bedroom, turn it on airplane mode. And then I also unplug my router at night. We don't need our internet turned on or kept on at night. Turn it off, unplug it. If you can control that, do it. The other sort of last thing that coincides with all of this, and this is like my routine, is making your bedroom as dark as possible. So
Oh,
unplugging things that even have like a little red light or a little like green light, on some sort of device that will light up the room, even if it's faint and soft. Compare it to unplugging everything in your bedroom that you don't need and turning off all the lights, blacking out the windows with window curtains. I've done that, and I mean, I sleep great. It absolutely makes a difference, and you can't really tell how much it does until you do it, and
right,
until you
right.
actually black out your room and unplug every little thing that doesn't need to be plugged in, and you see what actual darkness feels like in one's own bedroom. You'll get the best night of sleep that you've had in a long time for sure.
Those are
And
great
so
tips.
yeah, so that all contributes. It's all free. It's all easy. And they're actually big things that can really move the needle.
Lovely. It's been a joy talking to you. I have to say, you look very, very wide awake for whatever hour it is where you are. What time is it?
It's 5:30.
You're amazing. You look so awake. Incredible. I mean,
Thanks,
yeah.
Sonia.
Thank you. Lance, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I do appreciate it. I think we do need to always look at things holistically. And I love the idea of joining all those dots. So important. Everybody, this is Lance Shuttler. He's the CEO and owner of Ascent Nutrition. And I will, if I haven't already, put a link in the description to the website. Thank you for joining us this morning. And big love to Terry, who brought us together. Take good care
Yes.
of yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much, Sonia. I appreciate it. Keep up all the
Pleasure.
great work.
Thanks, Lance, says Nikki and Jeannie and Mark and what loads. Just read the comments. Take good care of yourself. Lots of
Okay.
love. Bye.
Thanks, Sonia. Bye-bye.
Bye. Lovely to have him with us. And, it's really funny because the moment that I heard him say Trump, I felt all these weird things go in my body. I'm like, how does that all make sense? I liked him. And I do think it is often key, isn't it? Trauma can change us so much. And the fact that he went through that experience with his father and his father taking his own life, which is unbearably traumatic for any child. I mean, but it put him on an incredible path. He's actually published over 300 investigative articles. So do check him out. I will put a link in the description. And I did say I was going to talk very briefly about Raja Miah before I brought him in, but I didn't have time. So I'm going to mention Raja now. Now, Raja has been with us before. Raja, I noted that Greater Manchester Police, first of all, have contacted him, asked him to attend a voluntary interview under suspicion of harassment. They've refused to provide any details of the allegation against him, which is weird because that's not how police interviews work. How will he know, who he should have to represent him, what he should be addressing? So that's weird. And as he rightly pointed out, this is not how voluntary interviews work. No, indeed, that is absolutely not. But what I want to talk about is how upset and angry Raja appears to be about the Rupert Lowe rape gang inquiry. Now, he was originally involved. He was like an ambassador. In fact, he came on here and he talked about it and how he felt it was a great initiative. And I think it was necessary because, one, we'd had the big child abuse inquiry and not one of the recommendations had been put into practice. And that includes under the Conservative government. It's not just Labour. Obviously, as we know, the Conservatives are just as bad. And so that was one of the things. But also they were not really addressing the main issue of what was happening and how systemic the whole idea of rape gangs were. And so he talks about I knew there was a falling out because I can't remember how long ago it was. It was about a month ago. And I'd sent him a message saying, I'd like you to come on and talk about how this was before that they ended the rape gang inquiry. And I asked him if he'd come on and talk about it. And he was really short with me about it. And he's not normally short with me. And I knew it wasn't anything to do, it wasn't personal to me. I knew it was something to do with the rape gang inquiry. Anyway, he's now published one piece after another. And he said over 22,000 people contributed £800,000. That's nearly £1 million. To produce a report answering 3 questions the state had refused to answer. What happened? How did it happen? Why was it allowed to happen? And he goes on to say the report has not been published and what those donors were promised has become something else. Now, he's now done several pieces, and I'm referring to the first of 2 pieces. And he does this analysis about how he initially supported the inquiry as an ambassador from the outset. He contacted survivors personally, helped them to submit evidence. He believed in what it set out to do. And he said, actually, what's going on is not that at all. He said, what I believe the inquiry would do beyond the survivor engagement and evidence gathering it undeniably delivered was serve as a lever. And it did serve as a lever. I am in no doubt whatsoever that had they not launched Rupert Lowe's rape gang inquiry, there would not be a national inquiry. The government under Keir Starmer did not want a national inquiry simply because Labour MPs, including sitting Labour MPs, will be implicated. They will have turned an eye to what was going on in their community for fear of there being a problem to do with community cohesion, etc. And so that was one of the reasons why the government, the Labour Party, did not want an inquiry. And so the rape gang inquiry, headed by Rupert Lowe, forced their hand. So it definitely did that. Of that, I'm in no doubt whatsoever. But Raja is deeply concerned because now it turns out that Rupert Lowe actually wants to start naming names under parliamentary privilege. Now, on the surface, that sounds good. We need more names. We need naming and shaming. There's been too much hidden. There's been too much subterfuge. And he also has now said that with the money, he wants to fund private prosecutions. Well, Raja said none of those things were asked of people before they donated. And the thing about parliamentary privilege is actually, I'm not sure who that will benefit, and neither is Raja. And that is where I agree with him. Because the thing, and I'm going to quote directly from him, he says, parliamentary naming produces something different. Lowe stands in the chamber, names individuals under privilege, because parliamentary privilege is where your MPs are allowed to say what they want to say without being subject to the other laws of the land, such as defamation or libel or slander or anything else like that. So he wants to stand in the chamber at Parliament and name these names. Now, on the surface, like, okay, about time we did that. But actually, it's interesting what Raja says. And bear in mind, he's been in this game a lot longer than me or Rupert Lowe. So I do think that he knows a great deal more. And I do agree with him about the parliamentary privilege thing. So let me just go on and just continue quoting him directly. And so he said, the idea is that Rupert Lowe will stand in the chamber, he will name these names, and the story leads every outlet in the country by the following morning. It is the biggest political moment of the year. It puts Restore Britain, one man, no other MPs, 9% in the polls, no elected councillors outside Great Yarmouth, no Westminster presence beyond its founder, at the centre of the national conversation at the moment it most needs to be. But as he points out, is that it is the single most political act available to Lowe at this moment. However, if they're talking about prosecutions, any decent lawyer will absolutely argue, hold on a second, my client's name was mentioned in the Houses of Parliament. He cannot get a fair hearing. Knock it out. That's troubling. So I think Raja's point is that this is all about one man. The fact that Restore launched their political party literally the day after the inquiry closed has always been an issue for me. I'm not comfortable with that. It's too opportunistic. And prejudice of naming somebody and then expecting to get a private prosecution against them it's going to be almost impossible. And so for that moment of glory, that moment when the country is like, yes, about time, what will it ultimately amount to? Because parliamentary privilege will protect Rupert Lowe from defamation proceedings, but it protects nothing else. And so that appears to be Raja's problem. Now, other people say Raja's problem is also that he wasn't as heavily involved with the grooming gang inquiry as he wanted to be. And that may also be an issue. I don't know what is working there, but on the surface, he is right about Rupert Lowe's intention to name names and then seek private prosecutions. So I think that's interesting, but I'm seeing that a lot. And this often happens. This so often happens. And what you get is you get a momentum and people get excited. And it's like, okay, something is finally going to be done. And then people start to go in different ways. They start to do things which are not necessarily for the good of the cause. Egos start to get involved. And there is a lot of falling out amongst the kind of leading people to do with the grooming gang inquiry. I noticed that Sammy, who herself was a victim of grooming gangs and was actually on the panel for Rupert Lowe, she's not happy with Maggie Oliver. And Raja's not happy with Rupert Lowe. And so this does often happen. And oftentimes this is why nothing really ever gets done, because ultimately it's human egos at the center of this that often put their ego ahead of everything else. And I'm not suggesting that's what Raja is doing. It is my experience with Raja that he is somebody who cares deeply about this issue. So I just wanted to mention that. And what time is it? 10:40. I'm not sure how long we are going to go on today. We may go on significantly past 2 hours, but c'est la vie. It's bank holiday. I got the time if you got the time, because I want to talk about Madeleine McCann. And the reason I want to talk about Madeleine McCann is because yesterday was the 19th anniversary since Madeleine was reported missing. And now it's really key what I say there when I say was reported missing, because we don't know that was when she disappeared. All we know is that is when Kate and Jerry McCann said she disappeared. And given they have been less than helpful in the search for their daughter over the last 19 years, I am very reluctant to believe what they have to say. Anyway, Madeleine, she was 3 years old. She was almost 4. It was the 3rd of May, 2007. And I had a brief communication with somebody I know who lives in Praia da Luz, which is where Madeleine was reported missing from in Portugal. And this contact of mine spends some of her year in Luz and some of her year in England. And she wrote to me saying, beautiful day in Luz today. Nobody gave a monkeys about the McCanns. They have been scrubbed clean from Luz. And I think that's really good, because for the longest time, that little holiday resort, often known as Little Britain for how many, Little England rather, for how many Englanders go there, that was deeply impacted after the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And I noticed that last night the McCann family attended the annual tribute to Madeleine, and they do that in Rothley. And actually they were there with their twins, Sean and Amelie. And this is the first time I've ever seen them all together like this as a family. This is all in the national press this morning. There's Jerry with his usual scowl. There's Kate with a face of, oh God, what's going to happen now? And they all came together to mark the 19th anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance. And they vowed the search goes on to find her. They say to achieve some justice, to make the world that bit safer. Well, the problem is I'm here as a journalist to tell you we've had 19 years of lies, 19 years of wasted taxpayer money, 19 years of media, government and police complicity, 19 years of freedom of information requests that have gone nowhere, 19 years of the Tapper 7 and Kate and Jerry McCann's lack of cooperation around this case, despite the fact that stranger abductions are incredibly rare. Most instances of children going missing are related to family, friends, and people who have access to the children. 90% of the time. So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go on a bit of a journey. Last night, I went through a 31 chapter manuscript that I wrote for Madeleine McCann. Excuse me 1 second. Let me just clean my nose. Thank you. I wrote a 31 chapter manuscript about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. I was going through it last night. I was like, wow, I must have written this 10 years ago. And one of the reasons I wrote it is I wanted to make sense of the story because it didn't make any sense to me. And as you will see, and as you probably know, there are so many anomalies, it's insane. Anyway, I wrote this manuscript because I wanted to make sense of the story in order to be able to make my documentaries. I made 2 documentaries. One was about the police response to what was going on, and one was about the public relations and media response to what was going on. So let's go back to the beginning. May 2007, 9 British adults, 6 of them doctors, and their 8 small children. They're enjoying, we're told, a spring holiday in Praia de Luge, aka Little Britain, not Little England. And 30-something adults at the time, by their own descriptions, are similar. They spend their days playing tennis, running, and doing water sports while their children are at a creche. And many of us discovered once we started to drill down that this was a great holiday, apparently, for the adults, but not much one for children who spent so much of their time in the creche. And at night, the adults, we were told, dined at the local tapas restaurant. Their sleeping children, we were told, were left alone. That was according to their police statements, left unattended in their respective holiday apartments. We were then told on Thursday, May the 3rd, 2007, while checking her 3 children, Dr. Kate McCann raised the alarm that her then 3-year-old daughter, Madeleine, the oldest of her holidaying children, in fact, the oldest of all the holidaying children, had been abducted from her bed. And almost 20 years on, with millions of pounds of public money ploughed into a search, and Madeleine has not been found dead or alive, she has, however, become arguably the most famous missing child on earth. This is a story, as I've said many times, about more than a missing child. This is about establishment corruption and complicity. Within hours of Madeleine's reported disappearance, British ambassador to Portugal, John Buck, was on hand to assist the McCanns. And his presence, as police chief Gonzalo Amaral later noted, was to create a number of political issues between counterparts in the UK and in Portugal. His involvement, however, was merely the tip of the political iceberg. I did a little graph. This is my working class coming into play now. Here we go. Here's my little graphy chart. And this actually shows every single prime minister who is implicated in this cover-up. So that is Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and sitting Prime Minister Keir Starmer. None will take responsibility for their actions. It was, of course, Tony Blair who initiated all of this, and Gordon Brown took over from Tony Blair only like a month later after Madeleine had been reported missing. And Gordon Brown was seen very much as a money man, a bit cold, a bit detached. And I think one of the reasons that he hopped on this was because it made him look user-friendly, warm and cozy. He's rallying the troops to find a missing child. This has all sounded really great stuff, right? Sounded great stuff. But none of them will take responsibility for any of their actions. It was actually David Cameron who agreed to at the time, the 13 million spend on Operation Grange. And yet when he was still in power and I offered to share research with him about the case, his spin doctor declined. They did not want to see the evidence that I had gathered since 2007, which showed that British taxpayers should not be funding Operation Grange. They actually refused to see it. So that tells you a great deal, right? That tells you a great deal. And you know who else is a massive feature of this case? Is somebody who's currently a massive feature in his own right, and that is Sir Mark Rowley. Sir Mark Rowley, who is the Commissioner of the Metropolis Police, so the largest police force in England and Wales. And obviously he's the one who's coming out saying that Jews now need their own special police force. Well, the interesting thing about Mark Rowley is back in 2017, he was assistant commissioner and he actually retired from the Met. And yet in 2020, he rolled back in again to announce that there was a number one suspect for Madeleine McCann. And it was Mark Rowley who pushed the notion that Christian Bruckner was the number one suspect of Madeleine McCann, along with the German police. So he's an interesting state player to me, always. I really need to do something separate on him, although I did do a piece on Mark Rowley with my common purpose piece, because he's common purpose trained. So yes, a big feature. And obviously his police force oversees Operation Grange, which is the British police investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine. And it started out as a review of the Portuguese police investigation. Then it turned into an investigation, and it turned into an investigation based on a threat, which I'll talk about shortly. But there's been so many politicians who are implicated in this, all the prime ministers that I state there, all their home secretaries, other ministers. I've doorstepped a number of people and then threw in questions about Madeleine. That includes former Foreign Office Minister Liam Fox, former Justice Secretary Chris Grayling. Neither of those seem to believe that it was a problem spending as much money as we are on the Madeleine McCann investigation. I even doorstepped Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson, obviously, who is caught up in the whole Epstein scandal. And I doorstepped him about Madeleine. It was about 10 years ago. He was coming out of Parliament. It's before all the Epstein stuff came out. And he was coming out of Parliament. And so his history with this case is very interesting, because at the time that Madeleine was reported missing, he was the EU Trade Commissioner. And let me just take those out. I don't need them in. And in 2007, that was when he was the EU Trade Commissioner. And in the same month, he gave a speech in Portugal about the importance of EU to globalization. And he reinforced the vital relationship between Portugal and England. And at the time, Mandelson, obviously very, very close to Tony Blair. And it was Mandelson, Blair and Brown, their Labour government, who employed Clarence Mitchell. And Clarence Mitchell, the man who would be sent to Portugal to be spokesman for the McCanns, probably up to present day. And I encountered Peter Mandelson outside of Parliament. And actually, we had a fairly lively conversation about politics. And I was just kind of talking about the problems with his Labour. And he loved that. He liked the robust conversation. And then I said, I'm going to quote myself directly, let me ask you about something you do know about. Why did the establishment support the disappearance of Madeleine McCann the way it did? Then, rather than continue the conversation, I showed you this clip before, rather than continue the conversation, he chose to put himself in jeopardy. He walked straight into traffic to get away from my question about why he, his Labour Party and the establishment got behind the abduction of Madeleine McCann. So that was interesting. I've doorstepped quite a lot of people to do with this case, including Clarence Mitchell, because the narrative that Madeleine was abducted has been guided by Clarence Mitchell, a highly connected man. He was seconded from the UK's Foreign Office, from the government's Foreign Office in 2007, sent to Portugal to be with the McCanns. And in September 2007, when the McCanns were made arguido, or official suspect, as we call it in English, Clarence Mitchell resigned from his government job and became the McCanns' permanent spokesman. And I recently did a short about Clarence Mitchell and how he's really very much a state man. This was one of the first reporters. He used to work for the BBC, one of the first reporters on the scene after Jill Dando's assassination, obviously worked in the media monitoring unit in government. His job was to keep stories out of the press, and he did that very well. And he did that with the McCanns, and he turned the story around, because in September, when they were made arguido and he then came on board full time, even his own colleagues went into print and said he will turn this story around, and he did. He turned Kate and Jerry McCann into victims rather than suspects. And I did a short recently, and he's also featured in my documentary, but I caught up with Clarence Mitchell in his hometown of Brighton. It was on a night when he was hoping to be elected into public office as a Conservative, because this is a man who's leapt from one party to another, like he was part of Labour government. Then he wanted to become an MP, and so he linked up with Conservatives. And when that didn't work, he's now with Reform, running. He wants to be an MP for Reform for Reading. I would not trust him. He is absolutely a state actor. Anyway, I doorstepped him and I asked him about that. And he said that I said to him, I've been waiting to speak to you for a long time. And I'd sent him lots of information. I'd sent him lots of communication. He said, I know you have, Sonia, but now is not the time. And I disagreed, because I think that you want to be elected into public office. And yet there's all this money that has been spent from the British taxpayer, money that we could use certainly elsewhere. And you have been responsible in part for the spending of that money, but you want to be elected into public office. No, tonight is absolutely the night to have this conversation. Anyway, he walked fast to get away from me. And then I called after him. Why would a family of a missing child require a PR machine behind them, Mr. Mitchell? And he was furious, and he turned back. He walked back towards me, and he practically spat out his words in anger. He said, it's because of people like you. What do you mean, an investigative journalist who wants to get to the bottom of it? And I think he gave up quite a lot of information in that one statement. This case has been reported on all around the world, and almost all of it is exclusively in favor of an abduction narrative, of which Clarence Mitchell is largely responsible for honing and crafting and keeping going. So yes, anyway, he didn't get into Parliament, suffice it to say. But you know what? One of the major issues about this case that many, many people realised a very long time ago is the sheer volume of anomalies. And there's so many, many anomalies. And I'm going to start to work through some of them. And one of them is, let's go right from the top, really. And that was the issue of the reporting of Madeleine disappearing, right? The McCanns and their holidaying friends insisted that they had called the police immediately on discovering that Madeleine had disappeared. But the first registered call to the police was not until 10:41 p.m. That's some 40 minutes after Kate had first discovered her daughter missing. By the time the officers had arrived from GNR, which is the military arm of Portuguese police, and they arrived around 11 p.m. at the Ocean Club, which is where all the people were staying. And there were numerous people roaming around McCann's apartment. In fact, the crime scene was contaminated right from the beginning due to McCann's and their holidaying friends. The crime scene, the bedroom of apartment 5A, was almost certainly contaminated by that point. And by dawn, Madeleine McCann had not been found. To all intents and purposes, the missing child appeared to have vanished into thin air. So why weren't these people, these 6 doctors, for one example, why weren't they charged with neglect? Because they all told the same story, that they were leaving their children home alone every night, and they were going off to the tapas bar, etc., etc. Well, critics believe that, and I absolutely support this, critics believe that if the case had involved single or working class parents rather than respectable doctors, the outcome would absolutely have been different. Almost certainly the children, including Sean and Amelie, who are now grown, would have been put into care, maybe foster care. The parents would have been castigated in the press, right? If it had been anybody other than these very middle class, respectable doctors. But many people also say that the leaving alone, the neglect story, was an alibi. For if the children were not left alone, how could an abduction have taken place? And in those anomalies, so much weird behavior that didn't, even according to their own family, didn't really follow who they really were. One example of that, by the way, was their turning to religion, right, in a deeply Catholic country. And what happened was, within hours of Madeleine's reported disappearance, Kate McCann had requested a priest. One of the priests who was available has been airbrushed out of their story. And I'll talk about him one day, but I don't want to get off of the subject here. But so what essentially happened was that then began this extraordinary relationship between the McCanns and religion, and again gave them this halo effect. These are deeply religious people, and yet they were aligning with people who were not good. Right. For one example, so shortly after Madeleine's reported disappearance, so in May 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann flew to Rome, and that was a private jet supplied by the uber filthy billionaire Sir Philip Green. And they met Pope Benedict XVI. They were also joined in Portugal by priests from the Algarve and England, and they visited with an army of cameras, very PR, the Holy Shrine of Fatima in Portugal. And then Kate and Jerry, they had regular visits to the local church, the Nossa Senhora de Luz, Our Lady of the Light. And I actually, on the second occasion that I went to Luz, we were fortunate enough to have an apartment that looked out over the church. And I just it was quite mind-blowing because I knew so much about the church and what had happened. And so they were given church keys, apparently, so they could pray in private. But there was a lot of question marks about what went on in that church when they had their private access to it. Because later on that year in 2007, police began searching the church in the belief that Madeleine's dead body had been hidden there. And that has long been stated amongst people. And lots of people believe that Kate and Jerry McCann used religion for public relations purposes. And Susan Healy, Kate's own mum, did little to help dampen this accusation when she told reporters, and I'm quoting her directly, Kate and Jerry were not the most devout family, but Kate certainly has clung to her religion since this happened. Well, in a devoutly religious country, and suddenly Kate has clung to her religion. No, I didn't find it genuine. Still don't. There was, of course, lots of issues with the Fighting Fund, mired in controversy. Within days of Madeleine's reported disappearance, the McCann family were accepting donations to the Fighting Fund. There were collection buckets were placed around Portugal and England. Members of the extended family promoted the fund on TV and radio, and that fund is controversial. Children donated pocket money, elderly citizens gave pension money to aid the search for Madeleine, only to discover that the McCanns had paid mortgage payments on their Leicestershire home from it. Many assumed that the Find Madeleine Fund is a charity. It's not. It's a limited company. And Kate and Jerry McCann, as directors, are legally entitled to use funds how they see fit. They brought in millions. At least 1 million is still sitting in a bank. I reported recently on a man who tried to get a judicial review about the amount of money that British taxpayers are spending on Operation Grange. And he was quite fairly asking, why isn't money being used from that private fund? Well, Kate and Jerry McCann have said, well, when Operation Grange stops, they'll use it then. But will they? Because what we know from past history is that only a small percentage of the Fighting Fund was ever used to search for Madeleine. And there was a lot of problems with the money that they did spend, which I will talk about. So the thing is, one of the things that they did is that some of that money that was donated to finding Madeleine has been used to make sure that only the abduction theory has been pursued. It is a fact that the publicly donated Find Madeleine Fund spent resources ensuring that newspapers and media pursued only the theory of abduction. Now, that doesn't sound right. People are giving money to a fund to find Madeleine, but the family involved only want everybody to focus on the abduction narrative. Why would that be? The other, what I consider an anomaly that they did was they put really odd images of Madeleine out, right? A small child has gone missing, and the images that they put out were disturbing. I've got them here. And 2 of them were taken by a photographer called Jason Grover, the first 2. And the one in the middle, always odd. It's almost like very coquettish. And there's also one of her where she's sucking a lollipop. And people just felt there was something a bit off with those images that were taken. And a few years ago, the wife, I think it was the wife of Jason Grover, somebody related, actually, it was a different Jason Grover. Right. The wife of another photographer called Jason Grover, who does only wedding pictures, had contacted me and said, people think that my husband took iffy pictures of Madeleine McCann. He's not that Jason Grover. He's a different one. So this is a known fact. I mean, even TV detective Mark Williams Thomas had a problem with some of the imagery that was put out. But certainly I, as someone who's very interested in child safeguarding and child protection, very bizarre. The third picture speaks for itself. It would appear that that was taken in Praia da Luz, and just the whole imagery is off. Even if you cannot articulate what is wrong with any of those pictures, you know something is. You know something is. You know, Kate McCann in her book described her family as ordinary. And yet within days of Madeleine's reported disappearance, a plethora of famous names were rallying to the cause, proving, in fact, that the McCanns and the case of their missing daughter was anything but ordinary. The now defunct News of the World brought together celebrities offering a 1.5 million reward package for the safe return of Madeleine. Names included J.K. Rowling and Simon Cowell. Two people who I don't have a great deal of good words to say about. Richard Branson, a third person, supplied fees for legal costs. Footballer David Beckham, Wayne Rooney and Ronaldo, they issued television appeals. Over time, the public have grown increasingly uncomfortable, and rightly so, with the apparent celebrity status, another anomaly of Kate and Jerry McCann, including trips to celebrity-packed events and cozy sofa chats on daytime TV. And how many times have we been told that Madeleine has been found? Since she's been reported missing, there have been numerous sightings of her from around the world, including attempts to fraudulently acquire the reward money. The first sighting came just days after her disappearance in May 2007. A British woman was captured on CCTV footage with a young blonde girl at a petrol station in Portugal. Images were given to the police for the McCanns to check. The Portuguese police reported that the McCanns, Kate in particular, had shown no interest. And a direct quote from the Portuguese police is, as if not expecting to get her daughter back. Kate denied this, but this was one of many such accusations from the Portuguese police. Then we had the three Arguidos. In July 2007, 2 months after Madeleine was reported missing, Robert Murat, a British expat with questionable associates, had been helping the police and journalists with translations. He was declared Arguido, official suspect. And three of the McCann's friends definitely tried to pinpoint him. They'd said he was near the apartment on the night. He denied it. And Arguido is a Portuguese legal status. It affords the person of interest the protection of law while they are asked questions by the police. It means that should they be charged, their statements have to be viewed within the strict confines of the law. And it was funny because for Kate and Jerry McCann, despite insisting they would remain in Portugal until Madeleine was found, the McCanns left the Algarve with permission a day after being made Arguido and returned to their Leicester home. And in 2008, the case was shelved in Portugal, and the McCanns and Murat were no longer Arguido only because the case was shelved. They were never cleared. The McCanns and their friends have never, ever been cleared of any involvement in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. Robert Murat went on to sue British publications for defamation. He won substantial damages. Another really odd thing that happened concerning Madeleine was she was made a ward of court at the request of her parents shortly after her reported disappearance. The McCanns used the wardship to ask the court to order Leicestershire police to disclose details of reported sightings of Madeleine. So they said that that could be investigated by a detective agency. But essentially, the McCanns sought advance notice of what was being held on police files, which is highly questionable, given that even before they were made Arguido, they were already suspects, right, in their daughter's disappearance. And for observers, myself included, this posed something of a very interesting scenario. The judgment was decided by Lady Justice Hogg, and I'm not a fan. In 2016, she carved out her own notoriety, right? She returned an abused child, Ellie Butler, to an abusive father, Ben Butler. In an unprecedented move, she ordered all records to reflect that he was the innocent and wounded party. Well, within months of this unprecedented action, where Mrs. Justice Hogg was absolutely pro Ben Butler to such a degree, he then went on a PR tour. He was on This Morning. He was talking about how he was the victim, blah, 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 blah. Within 11 months of Mrs. Justice Hogg returning Ellie to the parents and essentially standing down all social services, there was nobody with their eyes on this little girl. Ben Butler murdered Ellie. And I will never forgive Mrs. Justice Hogg for that, because she made that vulnerable child all the more vulnerable. And one of the things that we frequently heard, didn't we, that Portuguese police were incompetent. Well, but how true was that? From the beginning of the investigation, the Portuguese police were accused by the McCanns and the media of being incompetent. Oh, come on now. The search for Madeleine McCann was the biggest manhunt in Portuguese history. Within days of Madeleine's reported disappearance, the PJ, the Policia Judiciaria, had 150 officers on the ground, sniffer dogs, mountain police, and even the Coast Guard's fire brigade had become involved in the search. It was an ever-widening area. Undoubtedly, there were mistakes. I saw mistakes myself as a novice. One example, media cameras had captured forensic technicians working outside the bedroom window, the so-called bedroom window that the abductor had kidnapped Madeleine through. And we saw that they were dusting this down for fingerprints and everything, but they weren't wearing the regulation suits or gloves. So clearly there were mistakes that were being made. It looked amateurish, could obviously have contaminated further the crime scene after the McCanns and their friends had contaminated it. Equally, the constant leaks to the Portuguese media largely could only have come from police sources, as it included information that the McCanns were not even privy to. But the fact is, in many respects, neither the McCanns or the PJ came out of the battle with full honours. People make mistakes. And also there was so much frustration going on at the police, at the Portuguese police. They probably felt that they had no alternative in some respects to turn to the media, because they realised that this was an international story with political intervention. So it was troubling. Just to talk about those private detectives that I mentioned before, right? The McCanns had insisted that private detectives were only employed towards the end of 2007, after the Portuguese police, in their words, had failed to follow up leads. Kate and Jerry McCann, actually, though, were already seeking advice from agencies within a week of Madeleine's reported disappearance. And what's happened over the next few years is the Find Madeleine Fund, as well as private benefactors, would pay for the services of a series of dubious private investigators, most of whom had no experience in missing people detection, and one at least was involved in money laundering. Kevin Halligan was revealed to be a con man who wasted over £500,000 of the fund money. Halligan, brought in by Clarence Mitchell and described as one of the big boys, was subsequently extradited to the USA to face charges there. From the beginning, the Portuguese police made it clear that they did not approve of involving private investigators in the search. Nonetheless, individuals were brought in, accused of intimidating and silencing witnesses and trampling over ongoing police investigations. There has never been a satisfactory conclusion to the use of private detectives. They were phased out, we were told, around 2012, after the Metropolitan Police began the British inquiry into Madeleine's disappearance. And one of the questions I often hear is, do British police supply special preferential treatment to this case? Well, yeah, duh. In July 2007, so 2 months after Madeleine's reported disappearance, Jerry McCann was given a standing ovation at the Police Federation Annual Bravery Awards in London. So I just want to get that correct. You go on a holiday with 3 children, you come back with 2, but you are given a standing ovation at the Police Bravery Awards. This is the problem with the world. And there's more than one person who has told me there are Freemasonic connections around this. Leicester is a hotbed of Freemasonry. And in fact, some of the McCann's meetings with their friends have been held in Freemasonic establishments. So it is highly likely that this was very much, you know, the handshake crew altogether. But what that was an early indication of the peculiar relationship that would form between the parents of Madeleine McCann and the British police. And in the 19 years since, there have been extraordinary examples of what appears to be police favouritism, including this continuing Scotland Yard investigation, Operation Grange, for a case that didn't take place in the UK, that we cannot justify. We actually cannot justify this investigation for one child and one family, when so many other children go missing on a daily basis. And examples of other interesting police behaviour, again, I suspect shaky hand crew, included Sir Bernard Hogan Howe, who was at the time the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. He released balloons on a Liverpool hilltop to mark 100 days since Madeleine had been reported missing. Who the hell does that? What police do that? A senior cop releases balloons on a hillside. Come on now. Something clearly wrong. There was so much questionable behaviour, including police escorts for the McCanns, even sealing off a child's playground so the McCanns and their children could enjoy time there alone. Can you imagine? This is clearly weird favouritism. And in correspondence between the then official suspects, the McCanns, and the Leicestershire police chief, then Stuart Pryor, he was absolutely overfamiliar, and he insisted that they call him Stu. You're talking to people who are official suspects, right? Freedom of information requests that I have sent to Leicester police were considered. They were rejected under grounds of national and international relations and security. This is how they keep getting away with it. And Operation Grange was launched on a threat. Okay, as I say, it was originally a review. It turned into an investigation. And what happened was that the Sun newspaper, then run by Rebecca Brooks, good friend to David Cameron, who was then the Prime Minister, they ran a front page editorial, and it was about Theresa May, and it was about that this needed to be an inquiry. Now, people have always said, but if the McCanns or any of their friends knew what had gone on, why would they want an inquiry? Well, in part, people want an inquiry because they want a resolution to it so that they can say that this has taken place. And also bear in mind, at the start of Operation Grange, it was made very, very clear that neither the McCanns or their friends were of interest to Operation Grange. So the McCanns got their Operation Grange, which essentially put on ice this investigation, and has done ever since. So well over a decade. And that threat from News International executive Rebecca Brooks to her friend David Cameron, that she would put Theresa May, then Home Secretary, on the front cover of the Sun every day for a month unless Cameron gave the go-ahead. And then he did. Within 24 hours of that front page, the budget was granted. And the outcome of Operation Grange is still unclear. And that's what I mean. Why? All these prime ministers are culpable, they're all responsible, and they lack accountability. And we cannot forget the madness that accompanied some of this. Remember the curious e-fits? Jane Tanner, one of the McCann's holidaying friends. I wonder if I can, I've got available to me an image of all the holidaying friends. But Jane Tanner, oh, spare me. So Jane Tanner was one of the holidaying friends. Actually, she didn't know Madeleine very well at all, comparatively, compared to a lot of the other people who were there. And she provided what was to become the primary EFIT for 5 years. Her original EFIT was greeted, frankly, with universal ridicule because, and we called it Eggman in newsrooms, because it was quite literally the shape of an egg and had no facial detail whatsoever. Right. Over the following months, Jane Tanner seemed to recall more details of the alleged abductor, but neither the Portuguese police or media considered her sighting to be credible, and with very good reason. She was not credible. She remained not credible. And what happened in 2013 as part of the ongoing Operation Grange, Jane Tanner's EFIT was finally ruled out and replaced as the primary EFIT with that of a man seen by the Smith family holidaying in Portugal at the time of Madeleine's reported disappearance. Now, despite this, Tanner's EFIT remained on the Find Madeleine website. That's not good. It was continued to be given priority on the official Find Madeleine website. And I contacted them numerous times to ask them why that was. This man has been ruled out. It turned out apparently he was a doctor who was picking up his child from the creche, unlike the McCanns and their friends, eh? So Jane Tanner could never be trusted, and not least because the McCanns and their friends, they played fast and loose with the police. In the end, they refused to do a reconstruction. They refused to go back and do a reconstruction, which was actually outrageous, because when they've claimed we did everything we could to find Madeleine, no, you didn't. And because despite many promises made, that police reconstruction never materialized. And Portuguese police files reveal that inconsistency and the problems there. There is an inconsistency in the timeline, and they just didn't want to go and deal with it. But what they did instead was in 2009, with the aid of their private detectives and a film crew from Channel 4, the McCanns carried out their own reconstruction to make it look like they were doing something based only on their version of events. And this was shown on Channel 4, a British TV station, if you live outside the UK. The documentary has been renamed Mockumentary by myself and many others because it's ridiculous. And I was given by the office of the original police coordinator, Gonzalo Amaral, a timeline of how a true construction would look based on the Tapas 7 or Tapas 9, however you want to call them, based on their witness statements. And it didn't match the one that Kate and Jerry McCann and their friends gave. No wonder they didn't want to do an official police reconstruction, because that would have kicked up all manner of anomalies. So I tend to agree with the PJ theory. And the PJ theory is that Madeleine died behind the sofa in the holiday apartment. And one of the reasons that I believe that is because dogs don't lie. Martin Grimes, an extremely experienced dog handler, took his dogs, Eddie and Keir, at the request of the McCanns, took them to the apartment in August, so some months after what had happened. And actually, you can actually see for yourself, this is only a brief clip, but this is where one of the dogs is kicking off. Now, these are extremely, extremely experienced dogs. They were used in cases in the US, and people were actually convicted based on evidence and testimony to do with these dogs. And so this is no laughing matter. We're not talking about, my crazy street dog from Romania. We're talking about highly skilled cadaver and blood dogs. That's what we're talking about. So here's a clip. I think we can clearly all see that that dog knows something untoward has taken place there. And I'm going to refer to what was actually said by Gonzalo Amaral himself to do with this. Let me just bring an image of Madeleine back in. And he was actually talking about the director of Portuguese police and what his belief was of what had happened. And they believed that, and I'm quoting directly, the child's death must have resulted from a fall behind the sofa where the dogs marked the odors of cadaver and blood. The theory is simple and based on evidence in our possession. The parents would have pushed the sofa away from the window as a safety precaution because the window opened easily and it was situated, remember, 3 meters above the outside pavement. When Gerald went to the apartment at around 9 p.m. to check on his children, used the toilet and then left, Madeleine might have woken up, hearing her father's voice coming from the street outside. She may have tried to reach the window by climbing on the sofa and could have fallen behind it. Now, I'm absolutely aware that there are people who believe that Madeleine died before that date. And I get that. And for me, the jury is still out, but I still believe that behind the sofa is the clue to what took place. And as I say, these were not just regular dogs, and he was not just a regular dog handler. He was a renowned dog handler, successful for assisting US and UK prosecutions. And those Springer Spaniels, Eddie and Keir, were exceptional. Eddie specialized in the scent of human corpses, and Keir, a bloodhound. Eddie had never given a false alert in over 200 previous outings. And they alerted in the apartment where Madeleine was reported missing, on clothes belonging to Kate McCann, on Madeleine's cuddle cat toy, and in a hire car that the McCanns had hired after Madeleine's disappearance. And Kate and Jerry McCann had answers for almost every bit of it. The McCann said that the smell of death may have been found on Kate's clothes because she was close to 6 corpses at work in recent times, and on Cuddle Cat because she sometimes took it to work with her for some reason. And they said if Madeleine's DNA was found in the car boot, it may have come from the children's dirty nappies. Any blood in the flat that Keir had detected, blood below the window, we've seen that, in the apartment, might have come from Madeleine grazing her knee or suffering a nosebleed. And Martin Grime was very clear that the dog's alerts were of no value unless corroborated by forensics, which brought us to another problem, because the Forensic Science Service in Birmingham was a problem. And it was attached to the Home Office. And only a year before, Tony Blair had been at the Forensic Science Service, and he had promised that there would be that what he wanted and what the FSS wanted was everybody's DNA in the UK. And previously, well, still apparently, they could only get that if there had been a criminal charge. And so only a year before, the FSS was actually involved in something which is quite controversial. And that was a prime minister had said he wanted to extend the gathering of DNA. And what was interesting about that, of course, was then Jerry McCann came out and said that if there'd been these kind of extensions and Amber Alerts in Europe, they became very political, then this might not have happened to them. So you see how it all tied together. But anyway, the FSS in Birmingham concluded that although the blood samples contained 15 of 19 alleles belonging to Madeleine, an organism typically has 2 alleles, one being inherited from each parent, there was no conclusive evidence that the blood was hers. And asked by a Portuguese reporter to explain the forensics, Jerry McCann, a man of science, we're told, right? He's a heart specialist, and his wife a doctor. And this was their response. It's not a great recording, but you can hear it.
Explanation for that. Ask the dog, Sandra.
Ask the dog, Sandra. Your daughter's missing. Highly professional trained dogs have gone in, and a reporter doing her job, although she's since turned, a reporter doing her job asks you a question, and you're saying, ask the dogs, Sandra. And a lot of people saw Jerry McCann's narcissism and arrogance in that. And there's so many questions that are outstanding. How did the abductor manage to get in through the window and leave no DNA evidence? Right? How did that happen? And, you know, there's the sofa moving, all the stuff there. And of course, with Gonzalo Amaral, he refused to go away. I mean, even when he was sacked, right? He was the coordinating officer of the Portuguese police, and he was sacked in October 2007. He'd lost his temper with a journalist, made critical remarks about the British government and the case. And it was said that Gordon Brown knew that Gonzalo Amaral, a Portuguese cop, was going to be sacked before Amaral knew himself. But since 2007, Amaral has been, frankly, McCann's arch nemesis. He released his book, translated to The Truth of the Lion and accompanying documentary, in which he claimed that Madeleine had died in apartment 5A and the couple had simulated abduction. And that's been the subject of lengthy legal disputes. And he had at one stage all his assets frozen, including the income from the book and the film. Began, I think it was an 8-year case of wins and appeals, and resulted eventually in Amaral's final win. And his legal case was made up of donations, largely by the British public, including anonymous police officers. However, the McCanns believed that the lengthy judgment against them was frivolous, including accusations that the couple were never officially cleared. They'd launched further action. They failed. The judgment stated that they'd never been cleared, and it went on and on and on. And so they've never been cleared either in a civil or criminal court. And there have been so many problems about this case. As one example, the Gasper statements, which I have covered, where doctors Catherine and Errol Gasper gave Leicester Police Station, McCann's local police in England, statements, and they made some very serious allegations. And I've done this in a separate report about Madeleine McCann and the predators, and nothing. And also, what about that was that they gave their statements in which they claimed to have seen both Jerry McCann and Dr. David Payne, who was there, engaging in a conversation which was paedophilic in nature, in which Katerina Gasper believed they were discussing Madeleine. And she said this didn't happen just once, it happened twice, in which they were discussing Madeleine. And Dr. David Payne put his finger in and out of his mouth and circled his nipple, saying she liked this. And Katerina Gasper believed they were talking about Madeleine. And that was the statement that was given to Portuguese police. However, even though the McCanns and their friends said Madeleine had been taken by a predator, it took from May 13th, a day after Madeleine's 4th birthday, until October for the Leicester police to send this statement, when Amaral had gone by this point, to send this Gasper statement to Portuguese police. So a lot of fiddly stuff had taken place. A lot of fiddly stuff. The role of the media, of course, absolutely abysmal. From Madeleine's disappearance in May 2007 to September 2007, the British and Portuguese press unleashed a tsunami of sensationalist and scurrilous hearsay surrounding Madeleine's disappearance. It was actually a dark period in journalism. They just simply weren't checking. It was almost like it was planned to fail. And then what happened? And also, Madeleine had tremendous pulling power. That they had the potential. Some newspapers were saying that they would add 30,000 copies to sales each time she was on the front page. So tremendous pulling power that has continued ever since. And journalists and editors, they dispatched with kind of any pretense of fair or substantial or substantiated reporting. It was quite atrocious. Kate and Jerry McCann then succeeded in winning hundreds of thousands of pounds for the Find Madeleine Fund. Almost 30 cases had been identified to pursue through their legal team, Carter Ruck, but not all of them came to court. Many were settled before they reached there. There was also an unprecedented apology on the front page of the Daily Express. And all of this served to warn media off. And after that, the abduction narrative was settled. That was it. There was never any further question, and hasn't been, which is why you do need people like me. But the internet came into its own, right? The McCann camp utilized the internet to raise awareness for the Find Madeleine Fund. And the website was launched amidst much fanfare and received 80 million hits in the first 3 months following Madeleine's reported disappearance. And in many respects, and I've said this before, Madeleine's case is the first to benefit from online detectives. And you people have been amazing. And I want to give a shout out to all of you people who are out there. I'm not talking about the so-called pro McCanns. It's been divided. Actually, I think Jerry came up with this whole idea of pro McCann and anti McCann. And the idea was that anti McCanns questioned the abduction narrative and the pro McCanns were good with the abduction narrative. But actually, that wasn't an accurate description, because these so-called anti-McCanns who actually demand justice for Madeleine. It's not that they are anti-McCann, they are pro-justice for Madeleine. And they've all been actually amazing. I'm not going to single any one person out because there's some tremendous people online. By the same token, there are also some absolute scum on the of this earth who I believe are working on behalf of Kate and Jerry McCann. And I wrote to Kate and Jerry McCann and I put to them some accounts who I believe are actually disgusting. They say disgusting things. They do appalling things. One is absolutely racist, just horrible, disgusting stuff. And I wrote to the McCann saying, do these people represent you? They would neither confirm nor deny. So I suspect that these people do represent them and are probably paid hands in some respect or another. And I'm not saying that the McCanns pay them, but somebody probably does. And there's a wider agenda. There always has been in the weeks following Madeleine's disappearance. Jerry held a press strategy meeting. He was all about that. He also had his really weird blogs as well going on. Really weird stuff for the father, father of a child who they say has been taken by a predator. But they're getting on with business as usual, right? Jogging, keeping themselves looking good, all of that. They were able, apparently, according to their own words, they were able to sleep, you know, through the night after a couple of nights. And as Pat Brown had said to me, she's an American what does Pat do? She's into forensics, but Pat has worked with a lot of children, a lot of parents rather, of children, missing children. And Pat is in, she's certainly in one of my documentaries. She might be in both. But one of the things that Pat said to me that always stands out is how the hell did they manage to sleep through the night after the second night? Because the parents that she works with, whose children have been taken, cannot sleep. They often have to be drugged because they're there thinking, what is happening to my child at this moment in time? But that didn't seem to bother Kate and Jerry McCann. And I would suggest it didn't bother Kate and Jerry McCann because they already knew what had happened to Madeleine and no further harm could come to her. Anyway, he held this press strategy meeting. He had a chart which illustrated the goals of the Find Madeleine campaign. It included the words wider agenda, and the chart had Freemasonic imagery all over it. And Kate and Jerry McCann also expressed desires to become politically involved in Britain's affairs and to set agendas to do with national and international missing people. Kate became a controversial ambassador for the charity Missing People. She still is. I still think that is utterly wrong. Again, what I said about Jerry, you go on holiday with 3 children, you come back with 2. What the hell are you doing as an ambassador for missing people? And both the McCanns explored setting up businesses around the issue of missing people, informed in part by the lucrative National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in America. And Jerry had gone over to America to talk with Ernie Allen, who was running that. And that's in its own right very problematic. I reported recently how Richard Branson had been involved in that. Lots of question marks. And also when I was making the documentaries, I tracked down a scientist who was involved in developing a money spinning kid microchip. And that was a very real thing. It was happening. Because parents were terrorized. This can happen to you. Your child could be taken. Consider a microchip. So a British scientist was developing a microchip. He eventually pulled out when he has sensed dark motives from those involved in the establishment. And the McCanns immersed themselves in matters of censorship and so-called freedom of speech. Jerry's involvement with the group hacked off as one example. And then the couple appeared at the Leveson inquiry into press ethics. Again, I thought that was really egregious that they were there, because Kate and Jerry McCann's whole thing has never necessarily been about press truth, but about forcing on the public the abduction narrative. So just to go back very quickly to some more anomalies, the crash records, her name changed. Kate McCann's name changed several times during the week. One day it was Kate Healy, another time it was Kate McCann. So that was quite weird. And the thing about some of these things, these anomalies, you can have one coincidence, right? You can even have 2. You can't have as many as they have, right? How did the abductor access the apartment? Why wasn't any DNA left behind? Why did Kate refuse to answer police questions, of which a British documentary is currently being developed about that? Did Kate physically search for Madeleine? But according to her own words, no, she didn't. Why did Jerry change his story about how he had accessed the apartment? Was it from the back or through an unlocked patio door at the side? Because he couldn't seem to work out whether it was or not. Why are the statements of the Tapas friends so inconsistent? Why did Kate and Jerry McCann trademark Madeleine's name? What day did Madeleine actually play tennis? What day did that so-called actual last picture of Madeleine? When was it taken? They told the story of the gemmed shutters, and that narrative was sealed very early, said by their friend Jill Rennick on GMTV, repeated by Kate and Jerry McCann. Peculiar happenings, and not one single hair of Madeleine's was ever recovered from the apartment, right? Why did Jerry have to fly home to obtain something with Madeleine's DNA on it? And did he actually supply an accurate representation of Madeleine's DNA to the police? And why was there no DNA of Madeleine? What the hell was that about? And as for the gemmed shutters that they promoted, why, how? None of it makes sense. I've been to that place, that window. There's no way some intruder could have come in and out as quickly as they reckon. And you know what? Fingerprints were found on that window. There were no additional fingerprints found on that window other than belonging to Kate McCann. And the windows had been cleaned either that morning before or that morning. And the only fingerprints on it was Kate McCann. And that's the window in question that Kate Healy, apparently, what she'd said that when she writes her book, she said, before this, I was Kate Healy and then I became Kate McCann. Yeah, but in the crash records, you also sign as Kate McCann. So even that, she can't keep her story straight. And that's the window in question, the one that Kate claimed that she found open to the left with the curtains fluttering when she discovered that Madeleine was missing. There was no sign of a break-in. There's no sign of gloves. And yeah, it had been cleaned the day before on May the 2nd. And the question about Madeleine and whether Kate actually did any searching, no, I believe she didn't, although the earlier interviews, they really give you an insight into what was taking place there. And she was asked by one reporter about, didn't you ever feel that you could and what the reporter was really saying is, we're all out here going, why the bloody hell is Kate McCann not looking for a child? That's really what the reporter was saying. And Kate said, I'll quote her directly. So we actually have, in our own way, it might not be physically searching, but we've been working really hard and doing everything we can really to get Madeleine back. And a lot of that was legal stuff that they were doing. But yeah, it's supremely unusual behavior. They appeared to get over it all very quickly. They were jogging. She had her makeup on. He was doing his diaries. There was the whole lack of emotion. Jerry getting back on with life, all of that sort of stuff. And also I came across this video of them on the first year anniversary, and they were being interviewed by one of the BBC's very own paedophiles. Check it out.
Making a very big effort to get the message out again. So in its latest form, what is the message you're giving on this first anniversary?
Well, the message is Madeleine is still missing and she needs to be found, and I guess we're urging people to help us still, and I know people have helped us from day one, but we still need that help, and Madeleine still needs that help, and we need that key bit of information. This could all be over.
Sure, I think this is really a direct appeal. We would not be here if we were not appealing to the public to come forward, to those who have actually phoned with information, whether it be to the police or a hotline. We want you to rack your brains. If you're in and around Praia da Luz, someone knows something that could unlock this, and that's the key thing for us.
Well, yes, I do believe that someone knows something that could unlock this, but I'm not sure that Kate and Jerry McCann want the answer. And I think that someone could indeed be the Smith family. And this is the EFIT that replaced Jane Tanner's ludicrous Eggman. And this is the one that people often seem to believe are the Podesta brothers. Actually, no, this EFIT is based on a description given by Martin Smith of an Irish family who were holidaying in Praia da Luz at the time. And the Smith family talked about how they witnessed a man carrying a young blonde child in pajamas at approximately 10 p.m. on the night of May the 3rd, 2007, the night Madeleine was reported missing, and at the time that Kate said she had gone missing. And Martin Smith stated that the man appeared uncomfortable and the child seemed to be in a deep sleep. The family observed the man walking quickly away from the area of the McCann apartment, carrying the child over his shoulder. And what happened in 2008, Martin Smith created EFITs of the man. The sighting was later considered credible by Operation Grange. It matched the time frame for the abduction, and the Smith family statement is absolutely believed to cover the true primary suspect of what happened. And the primary EFIT, this one, is supplied by Martin Smith, told police, I would be 60 to 80% sure that it was Gerald McCann that I met the night carrying a child. And so that is the reality. That EFIT is based on a family who believe they saw Jerry McCann carrying a small blonde female child on the night that Madeleine was reported missing. But Kate and Jerry McCann sidelined this EFIT for 5 years and continued to push Jane Tanner's ludicrous Eggman. And then, of course, we've had all the patsies, haven't we? Oh, for goodness sake, please. Outrageous. This child so deserves justice. We've had an assortment of predators and pedos, including Christian Bruckner. I once spoke to this guy, Aaron Collis. He, a convicted paedophile, he claimed that he'd actually taken Madeleine's life. But it turned out that he had absolutely wasted police time. He told me an absolute BS story. So many questions remain. The anomalies just keep coming. We know that. We absolutely know that. And also, as one example, if Kate had really truly believed that Madeleine had been taken on May the 3rd, why did she then continue to leave the twins? She left the twins in that apartment and ran to the tapas bar. So you leave twins, but you think there's a predator around. These twins were younger than Madeleine. Madeleine wasn't even 4. And also, was David Payne the last witness to see Madeleine again? He's somebody that I've doorstepped. I've told you what the Gasper family have said about him. And in her statement, Kate says that she talked with Dr. David Payne for 30 seconds outside the apartment on May 3rd, 2007. Yet David Payne claims it was for a longer period that he entered the apartment and saw the 3 children. So who's telling the truth there? The anomalies are just endless. I honestly, I can already see it's 11:45. I told you it would be a longer show today. I don't even actually have time for all the anomalies, including about the tapas bar bookings. There was question marks about that, whether the twins were sedated or not. Certainly people believe that these twins were drugged. And again, going back to what Jerry McCann said at Leveson, that people are allowed to purport a theory, and indeed we are. And I'm 100% convinced that Madeleine McCann was not abducted, right? And I'm also fairly convinced that chances are it was an accident. Other people believe something completely different. That's their prerogative. But I think it may well have been related in some way to the fact that Madeleine had, according to them, had woken up the night before. She had screamed endlessly, I think for her father as opposed to her mother. And it is possible, some people believe that it is possible that they might have upped the dosage of whatever it was they were giving the children in order for them to continue sleeping while they were at the tapas bar. Bear in mind that both Fiona Payne, David Payne's wife, and Kate McCann, both anaesthetists. Anyway, the whole thing is outrageous. Obviously, we're now here on the 19th anniversary. Again, big up all the researchers who have been prepared to do this. It's a slog. We have to continue because it's about so much more than all of us. It truly is. I'm sure there's many comments in the going on. Are you loving it? Love this longer show, says Jilly. It was, I feel, very possibly. Sylvia tends to agree. She believes that they were drugged as well. Rest in peace, Madeleine. I agree with you. And of course, we cannot forget some of the things that also took place. I wonder if I can bring up this image. Hey, it's bank holiday. You people are worth it. You deserve a longer one. And also, I think this story deserves it as well. But if you can remember this image, I put this on social media yesterday. It's Kate and Jerry McCann. The video turns my stomach because you actually see Jerry looking extremely joyful, like kicking balloons out the way and everything. But bear in mind, that was Madeleine's 4th birthday. That was 8 days after Madeleine was reported missing. And they look very well adjusted to the disappearance of their daughter at the hands of a predator. They look very well adjusted indeed. So as a journalist, I absolutely have refused to give up on this story because, as I say, it is about so much more than a missing child, as sad as that event is. And it is sad. It really is sad. And one of the things that I did, and just to end on this note, is, and it's the end of the first documentary I did about the police, I went to the PJ at Portimao, and it's the same police station where Kate McCann refused to answer questions. And I asked the policeman on the desk about the amount of foreign national children who have been abducted. And he looked at me with this wry smile, and you can hear it in the documentary because he knows what I'm referring to. And he responded, there is only one statistic in prior deluge, none, the first and the last. How interesting. Madeleine McCann was the first and the last child to have gone missing in that holiday resort. And so I believe that we've been sold a crock. I believe that there is a great deal of state complicity. And I believe as a journalist, it's absolutely wrong. And I'd be prepared to stand up in a court of law and testify to all of this and more. And just to add, and I can't go into any great detail, but this is important. I've recently, I believe, been harassed by Leicester Police and the CPS over this story. I asked them 3 months ago to give me more information. I was chasing it up last week. They are delaying very important information. They put pressure on me around the fake Madeleine trial. And I believe that they harassed me and that they breached my rights as a journalist. And when I can, I will report on that fully. So there's stuff ongoing that in its own right could potentially reveal a great deal of information in a court of law. So we shall see. We shall see. And thank you for listening to that. It is now 10 to 12. I just want to say very briefly, first of all, thank you to all my new subscribers. I read a letter the other week from two sisters who had come back together again over their shared like and dislike of me because they didn't agree with everything I said. Thank goodness for that, because that always suggests to me somebody's psychopathic if they agree with everything I say. But anyway, they'd come back together again. But since then, I've had 3 sets of sisters who don't know each other, presumably, who've all written to me separately saying, wait, we're sisters who watch your show together. So I love that. Thank you all. And one of those sets of sisters suggested Vanessa Feltz for A Dark Side. You betcha. Added to the list, girls. Added to the list. And hello to all new subs, many of them West Ham fans. They came here after hearing about me and what I had to say about David Sullivan and Karen Brady in our deep dive. Big up yourselves. Thank you for your kind words. And thank you to Nick on the Booze and Wine channel. Claret and Booze, actually, it's called. And very kind. Very kind. And thank you to all the Hammers fans. I'm thrilled. Absolutely thrilled. It's great stuff. Great. Add to us. And also I want to just address something. And I'd said during the deep dive that I did into Alan Sugar and Karen Brady, and I talked briefly about David Sullivan's fiance, Ampika Pixton. And Ampika Pixton is not somebody that I would recommend at all. OnlyFans, she'd set up a care home for children, ended up being closed. She allowed one of these young people to come to her house, absolutely breaking boundaries and everything. She's a reality housewife, but she was also, would appear involved with the Maggie Oliver Foundation. Maggie Oliver is the former Manchester detective who blew the whistle on grooming gangs. And it appeared that Ampika Pixton was involved in a celebrity fundraiser with Maggie Oliver. And I talked about that. And actually, it ended up not happening. ITV was expected to film this gala evening. It was going to be on the 1st of May, so last week, as part of Pixton's starring role in the Real Housewives of Cheshire. And Maggie Oliver endorsed Ampika, or rather endorsed actually the ticket event. And the ticket event was for victims of sexual abuse. Pixton announced about it in the first week of April. And Maggie was billed as a headline speaker along with 2 survivors. However, it didn't go ahead as planned because all the publicity linking the foundation to the fundraising event ended up coming down. And it would appear that Maggie Oliver is now quite rightly distancing herself from Ampika Pixton. And this is in part after a complaint that went to the Charity Commission by a woman who the foundation had previously counselled. And the woman who's asked for anonymity accused the trustees of failing in their due diligence. So anyway, it didn't go ahead. And actually, good shout, Maggie, do distance yourself from these people. These are not people that a charity to do with survivors of trafficking should be around at all. And a big shout out to Madeleine Hunt. She was on with us last week, and I've forgotten to copy over exactly what she'd experienced. But essentially, she came on to talk about the issue of locally led and what was going on. I literally cannot remember what she had written to me, but she had given me an update. So I apologize, Madeleine, but I'm going to link in the description, hopefully your Substacks. I believe that you've updated. But essentially, what she was saying is what had happened. And what is being fought over in Parliament to do with like local councils, everything that she feared from the interview last Monday was coming to pass. And so there it was. Don't forget, we are on Spotify and Rumble. And thank you as ever to all my donators, including West Ham fans, to Alf Garnett, to Swiss Miss, to Iris O'Callaghan, to James McCartney, to Elaine Edgar, to everybody who donates via PayPal or wherever. Thank you on the super chat today. Thank you to Kath Hutton, to Danielle Krause, to Paul Trainer, to James McCartney. Again, thank you to Daisy Lee, to Swiss Miss, and to Craig Campbell. Craig Campbell is somebody who cares so deeply about Madeleine McCann, so deeply. And he does the Only Cans podcast with Zoe. I know they haven't done one recently. I expect, Craig, you're going to be doing one soon, aren't you? On what's been going on, because I know it's frustrating for all of us, my friend. Thank you to Stolly Files as well. Craig says, keep up the fight, SP. Madeleine McCann left 15 out of 19 markers behind and 17 alerts. Justice will find a way. And Kaz lives a few miles from them. And thank you for your super chat. And Stolly File said, please buy your dog some treats. Thanks for your commitment. I will indeed. My dog is currently having hideously expensive food delivered to us. She's worth it. She's worth every penny. Right, before we end, an hour later than normal. And why not? Because you're worth it, right? People, you are worth it. I want to just talk briefly about being dumbed down, right? The rush for more hits. I often think about the process of being dumbed down, how mass TV has turned people into observers rather than doers, how complicated matters are distilled to almost nothing, how I'm repeatedly told you'll get more hits if you use clickbait titles, but I'm not going to do that because that is dumbing down. That's not for me. It's not for us. It's not for my viewers. I take great pride in what I do, and I do not take kindly to others dumbing down what I do either. I believe in journalism. I believe in good journalism. I believe we have been failed by journalism for decades, and certainly over the last 6 years. C19 was an absolute failure of journalism, and that was from corporate mainstream media. However, I don't like the way that podcasters suddenly declare themselves to be journalists off the back of absolutely nothing. It takes something to be a journalist. Be a podcaster. That's also something worthy. There's nothing wrong with being a podcaster, but it doesn't automatically make you a journalist. And I believe that dumbs down my profession every bit as much as the hired hands like whoever, Vanessa Feltz or Piers Morgan or Jeremy Vine or any of those people. Right. So I do believe that you can't just become a journalist overnight. It takes a lot more than that. And I think that there's a real arrogance and also assuming that my trade is not worth anything. Just because you speak into a microphone, it does not make you a journalist. And there's a world of mediocrity that is being crafted under the banner of being dumbed down. And, you know, the thing is that what I've discovered is that just being me, sometimes my mere existence can trigger someone's ego, right? Just my mere existence. Because, you know, frankly, I don't give a stuff a lot of the time, and people know that about me. And I try and keep away from, as I say, the dumbing down. I try and keep away from the drama. I try and keep away as much as possible from gossip, rumor, speculation, although to a degree, sometimes it does come in. And I definitely don't like, as I say, people who cheapen journalism, whether that is from corporate media or alternative media. Journalism is a craft. Stop dumbing it down. I'm proud to do it, even though my profession has let us all down. It irritates me greatly to see the attack on journalism. Journalism counts. Real journalism counts. And, you know, it just then made me think a bit more about how we as people will often dumb ourselves down in order to be able to fit in. And dumbing down really is sort of intentionally hiding your intelligence. And, you know, sometimes I've been told you intimidate people. Well, so what? so what? I don't set out to intimidate people. But if my presence, my intelligence intimidates you, then that is not my issue. And I will not dumb myself down in order to fit in or be people pleasing. Because the knock-on effect to me as a human being is incalculable. Well, the moment you dumb yourself down, you lose self-respect for yourself, right? And also it creates this kind of codependency in relationships because you then become dependent on other people's view of you. It stifles personal growth. None of this is good. None of this is good at all. It will create relationship issues. I will not put myself in those situations at all. So I am what I am, take it or leave it. And I don't mind people disagreeing with me at all, but what I will not do is create clickbait. I will not dumb down just for the sake of a few more hits, because I believe in the fullness of time. Friday show is a perfect example. When I do a deep dive or the dark side of, that can get hundreds of thousands of hits. When I do more investigative news stories, such as investigating Golders Green and everything that happened around that, it gets significantly less, but it won't stop me doing it, because the point is that I want my work to last in the fullness of time, right? So that you could watch it back in 10 years' time and it still makes sense. So I'm not looking for necessarily big hits. I don't sit down and go, oh, what can I do this week that will get us lots of hits? No, I tend to either follow what's going on in the news agenda and whether we can attach something to that or whatever. But what I don't do is I don't follow the news agenda and the decision made by other people about what should or shouldn't be covered. If I decide to cover it, I decide to cover it. As simple as that. And if we get 5 views, 5,000 or 5 million, it actually is immaterial to me. Of course, I like as many people as possible watching our work. Of course, that is an important thing to happen, but it cannot be the only reason for doing what I do, because I think I'd lose all semblance of myself. So I just wanted to say that. And as ever, of course, thank you to all the wonderful people who make this possible. Why isn't that moving? I'm going to bring that in again, because I'm so grateful to all the wonderful people who make this possible. Let me just bring that back in, the credits, and then I can leave you today to go and enjoy your wonderful bank holiday. If you're even on a bank holiday, because is it only the UK? Is it only the UK? Anyway, those are all my wonderful donators and patrons and more. And I just want to, actually, I'm going to end on 2 quotes. One is one of my favorites from Dolly Parton before she sold out during C19, but the quote is still great. And that is, find out who you are and do it on purpose, which I love. But I think this is also one of my favorites. And that is, being yourself is the most powerful thing that you can ever do. And you know that, peeps, you know it. Thank you for being here. I'm very, very grateful for you being here today. Amy, I will take note of that. Thank you all. Thank you all. Cosmic is off to plant some seeds. I did our pond yesterday. It's so brilliant. My daughter took me to another garden centre yesterday, bought loads of stuff, bought underwater plants for the pond, and I did the pond yesterday. I'm so excited. I love you all, people. Have a great day. Thank you, Mel's and Mark and Vendetta and Ella and Herbert and Marco and Dark Side of the Moon. I will see you Monday, and Mark and Nikki and Amy and Cosmic and Glennis and Kenneth and Philo and you name it, and Fun Times Forever and Ian and Henry and Bethany. It's been immense, Bethany. It really has. Lots of love to you all. I'm going off to have a large drink. And it might not be of the soft variety. Take good care of yourself. Have a lovely bank holiday if you have it. I'll see you Friday. Take